Hello everyone, and welcome to Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting series on what if Naruto inherited power of God of the Sea. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Don't remember much of my life as an infant, but the one memory of when I was no older than a year old. I remember an old-looking guy towering over me with a sad look in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Sally," he said before he opened a hole in the wall and he placed me through it. The next thing I knew, I was in an alley cold and alone, so of course I did the only thing an infant could do in my situation. I cried. I don't remember what had happened after that, but there I was in the Leaf Village helpless. I wish I could tell you my life was easy. A nice family found me and I lived like a prince, but I didn't. None of that happy stuff happened. I had grown up in an orphanage till I left at the age of 5. I had to scratch for any food that I could find, and sometimes I got into more trouble than my life could stand because my methods weren't always the legal way to get it. It wasn't till I was 7 that I was able to enter the ninja academy to become a ninja. That way I could earn money to survive. And it was there I meet my two closest friends, known to many as Itachi and Rika Uchiha. Several years later we were placed on the same genin team. Now I still had my share of troubles, and it was always those two who got me through it. I had finally found my family. Our sensei was a beautiful red-haired woman named Kushina Uzumaki, and she was tougher than trying to steal $1 from a crime lord. A couple years later a major loss hit me cause a demon attacked our village, and my sensei and her husband Minato, our 4th Hokage, died in order to seal the beast away. After that our lives had changed dramatically, as on that night Rika gained the power of the Mangekyo Sharingan. Itachi's ability to master jutsus and other skills grew amazing, and I gained an ungodly ability to control water that only our 2nd Hokage had even gotten. The three of us later were made Anbu Black Ops and were sent to Kiri, the village that was in a civil war. The story behind that is for another time, but during that time my life was changed again. My life was saved by Rika, since she donated a lot of blood to save my life after my battle with the 4th Mizukage. Then I was given the title Mizu no Kami, the god of water, since my mastery of the element is a legend throughout the village. And finally I came to terms with the fact that I was in love with Rika of the Uchiha clan. After that mission I meet a very special child. We had just returned home, and of course we had to check in with the 3rd Hokage. "Lord Hokage," I said as we all entered the room, and the first thing I noticed was a child that looked like a mini Minato. "Lord Hokage, our mission was a success. Kiri is free and willing to negotiate a treaty in exchange for more help to rebuild its village. I will deal with this personally. You all have my thanks," he smiling in a loving way that you would feel for a member of your family. As he handed us our checks I could tell Rika's curiosity was getting the best of her. "Thank you, Lord Hokage," Itachi said as he accepted his. "Ah, who's this cute little guy?" Rika said, looking over the little blonde. "My guess she just had to know, since he looked like our sensei's husband." "Oh, that's right, you four haven't met yet," the 3rd Lord said, turning to the boy who was watching us. "Rika, Percy, Itachi, this is Naruto Uzumaki." "Naruto, that's Itachi, and Rika Uchiha, and he is Percuse." We all looked surprised. This kid was our sensei's child, but hey, we shouldn't have been surprised. "Hi Naruto," Rika said using a motherly tone I had never heard before. "Well, if you'll excuse us, we'll be getting something to eat," I said, trying to get away so I could think all this over. "Want to come, Naruto?" Itachi offered. "Sure, bye Gigi," Naruto said happily as we all left the office. "Don't worry, we'll take care of him," I said as we left the old office. As we walked down the street I saw that many people were giving us death glares, but why I wasn't exactly sure. These people couldn't have remembered my younger years, I thought. When we decided what we wanted to eat I learned 2 major important things. 1. Never take Rika and Naruto out to eat ramen. Rika was bad enough with it. 2. If you do, you better have money to blow out your butt. After 10 bowls each, one had to cut the 2 off. The only good thing was that Itachi spotted me some cash. But I still had just blown through my paycheck from the Kiri mission, and I would have to work off 10 C-ranked missions just to get half back. We dropped the kid off and made our way to Uchiha compound, where we were greeted by Itachi's little brother Sasuke. "Hey kid, long time no see," I said, greeting the boy. "Hey Percy, you kiss Rika yet?" "Ahaha," I muttered, lost for words. I really regret telling him that I might have had feelings for Rika. Why you ask, Sasuke? Rika asked, and I really wish she was not here. Because ever since he met you he's been in love with you, Itachi said smirking. Traitor, I whispered. Oh Percy, Rika spoke in a sweet and scary voice. I slowly turned my head afraid for my life. That was when I got one heck of a surprise. For the first time in my life I got to kiss Rika Uchiha, the raven-hair Sharingan mistress. Now was that so hard? She asked. Upfront, caring, and open-minded, only three of the reasons love her. Well, I will see you three tomorrow, I said, walking to Mei house. Sweet dreams, Percy, Rika cooed. I won't lie, sometimes she can scare me, and that was one of those times. My apartment was not very far from there. It was the only one that was closest to the river, since water always calmed me down. That night I had a rather horrible dream. You see, I've never told anyone, not ever Itachi or Rika, this, but my control of water was so great I didn't need chakra to us water jutsus, and then there was this ability where I can see things, whether it be past, present, or future. My water ability is the reason why I have mastered so many water jutsus, and is why I defeated the fourth Mizu Kage and allowed me to earn my title, the Mizu no Kami. That night I had a really bad vision. I saw Itachi butchering his entire family. The only ones I didn't see was Rika or Sasuke. That gave me some hope for the future. That vision made me require the need to speak to the Hokage, since these visions were getting worse, and the last one almost as bad was when the fourth lord and my sensei died by the Kyuubi's claws. The next morning I woke up early enough to get to see the Hokage before the others got there for a mission. I was lucky he would see me so soon. Good morning, Lord Hokage. Percy, what seems to be the matter? I had another nightmare. This makes 5 in 2 weeks. This one was worse. I saw Itachi killing his whole family, only I didn't see Rika or Sasuke there, so I can't tell if they will die when this happened, and when it does I don't know. This is troubling, Percy, but your visions have always come true. My lord, I will not allow this one. I won't allow Itachi to ruin his life or lose Rika's to death. Percy, death is natural thing, we all die eventually. Not this early, my lord. I will not lose Rika like this. Percy, be careful, you might be starting on a path like Orochimaru did. Yes, my lord. Percy, if it will make you feel better, I came keep you three together on the same Anbu team. Thank you, Lord Hokage, I said, bowing to him. You're welcome, and let me know if you have any more of these visions. As you wish, I said, leaving. That night me and the gang meet up and decided that for our sensei we would watch over her kid. And Anbu's life is alright. I mean, it's not as hard since we mostly watched over, raised Naruto indirectly. Now we did get missions that would require the three of us specifically. I didn't have another vision for several years, but when I did, this one was the worst of them all. You see, I was running down a dark tunnel, and when I turned a corner I saw Rika standing in the tunnel, stretching her hand out to me. It's done, Percy, and I have some wonderful WWWS, Rika said before a blade pierced her stomach. No, I cried, running up to her. Why? I asked the killer, not getting a good look at him. She was a traitor and must die, he said, getting away. Hold on, Rika, I'll get help. No, Percy, it's too late for us. At that point I woke up in cold sweat, more frightened than I had in decades. So it's true, I could be too late the next time, I said, getting out of bed. Not much had changed after my team's years as Anbu, but me and Rika got Itachi promoted to captain, since he was way more fit and strongest of us all to lead the Anbu. So after that night I was leaving my home, I was suddenly met by Rika. Hey there, seaweed head brain. Hey there, Rika, sleep well? Not really, but I'm good now. Alright, well, let's get moving, she said, running off. Hey, she's always on the move, I said as I went after her. When we made it to the Hokage Tower, the old man was in good spirit as always. Good morning, Percy. Rika, I have a SS rank mission for you today. Yes, Lord Hokage, we'll get Itachi and head out in a few minutes. I said. I'm sorry, but Itachi will not be going with you this time, Sparrow. Another Anbuhi will be joining you. Your mission is to infiltrate one of Orochimaru's base that we found and bring back anything you can. Yes, Lord Hokage, I said before we left to get the job done. I could not shake the feeling that this was the mission. Rika is supposed to be killed. And truthfully, we could not have been sent into one of the most dangerous places ever. Once we got down into the snake nest, we had to fight our way to survive. Water-style water dragon jutsu, I said, hitting some of the guards. Amaterasu, Rika shouted, getting several others. Where's Sparrow? I roared to Rika. Not sure, he just disappeared, she replied back. So doing a stupid thing, I ran to find him. Sparrow, Sparrow, where are you? I shouted, running down a hall and into a room. There I saw an amazing sight, so many books and scrolls, my guess Orochimaru's jutsu and research vault. Jackpot, I said, pulling out a storage scroll and grabbing everything I could seal into the scroll. Then I heard a scream and I started down a hall, and when I turned a corner I saw Rika right before she was stabbed in the stomach. No, I cried, running up to her. Why? I asked the killer, not getting a good look at him. She was a traitor and must die, he said, getting away. Hold on Rika, I'll get help. No Percy, it's too late for us, she said, holding me tight. And like that I failed her. I had let Rika die for the sake of the mission. Percy, come closer, she said, doing as she asked. She placed her smooth hand on my eyes. I then felt something strange for a moment, and when she removed her hand she said, let this gift be the protection that I can't do anymore. I couldn't believe what she had done. Rika gave me her Sharingan. I looked into her sea blue eyes, and with tears filling my eyes I cried harder than I did the day our sensei died. I love you. I know I love you too, seaweed brain, she said, giving me one last passionate kiss before she died in my arms. At that point time stood still to me as I looked down to her, and she looked more peaceful than I've ever seen her. Huh, Rika, Rika, no, I cried, more tears than I ever did before in my life. T-Hen felt a faint chakra signature before it died, and I looked around before I looked down, and the Sharingan revealed that there had been a baby that was starting out before it died. That made it worse was, not had I lost Rika, I lost the child she was bearing, my child. That when something triggered, the Mangekyo Sharingan and the Amaterasu started to spread everywhere. So I grabbed Rika's body and ran the heck out of there. I wasn't sure if Sparrow got out, and I really didn't care. I completed the mission but failed my own. It took me several hours since I had to carry Rika's body back, but I got back to the village before sunrise. I walked up to the village gate and was spotted by the guards. Identify yourself, they said. Tsukuyomi, I said, getting them to pass out. I'm in no mood for this, I said, continuing my pace. I had decided that it would be best to take her to her clan, but when I got there, blood and dead bodies were all over the place. Itachi, I said, walking away to give her a proper funeral. I made her a stone coffin with my earth style and placed several seals on it so it could never be disturbed or Rika's body could be used for experiments. After I buried her in the ground, I made her a tombstone so whoever else knew her could pay their respects to her. I could feel there was something rotten in the village, and I decided to have a talk with the Hokage and the council. When I reached the tower and found out he was already in the middle of a meeting, that was just what I needed. And that means with Rika and Percy. A voice said. Dead. There's no one we can send to lead an attack against Itachi, said old man Homura. Indeed, it is a great tragedy to lose Rika. She was an extraordinary shinobi, old lady Kaharu said. Also that means young Sasuke is the only one with the Sharingan, some civilian council man said. Water style. Water dragon jutsu. I yelled, busting the door open, and I smiled with one of my signature jutsu just done cleared up. When everything cleared, I walked in and said, greetings from hell, and trust me, the look on their face was priceless. Percuse. But you're supposed to be dead. Not quite, Danzo, your guy failed to kill me. What are you talking about, Percuse? The Hokage asked. Your Sparrow killed Rika when my back was turned. That was when Sparrow and several other Anbu tried to go for me neck, but luckily I pulled out a kunai and slit their throats and caught Sparrow by the neck. For my wife and child, I whispered, using the kunai to stab him in the right eye, then his stomach, and I then slit his throat. It's done, Rika, I whispered, bringing a smile to my face. Percuse, it's good to have you back, the Hokage greeted me. Thank you, Lord Hokage. Now where is Itachi? He is on the run as he killed his family, leaving only Sasuke to survive, old man Homura said. I gave him a questionable look before saying, I call bullshit. Now, Lord Hokage, I need to speak to you alone. All right, Percuse. Meeting adjourned. We went to his office and got to business. Lord Hokage, it is stupid to believe any of this. I'm sorry, Percy, but it is true. My lord, I would like to request a personal mission. Quote. Like what? I would like to request a mission where I can use my time to search for my birth family. Why is that? Sir, I'm almost 16 and I just lost my wife and unborn child. I need to know where I came from so I can also learn where my Kekkei Genkai comes from. You have a Kekkei Genkai? He asked like he already knew. Yes my lord, I can manipulate water however I want without chakra. Even if there's no water around, and Rika gave me her Sharingan power. Ha Percy, I always said you could be the Nidoraime's reincarnation, the Hokage joked. Now Percy, you know what kind of position this will put you through. Yes my lord, I just have to know who my parents are and where I really came from. Very well Percy, you may have 1 year to find this family of yours, but by then you will have to be made a Juin and be on your toes. For when the council finds this out they'll be out for you to give them a clan of water warriors. Thank you Lord Hokage, I said, leaving the tower to get home. The world seemed darker to me as my whole world was destroyed before me. But I have to keep moving on, if not for me but for everyone I know. I spent weeks tarring through information Orochimaru's books had to offer, hoping for something that could help me. And I had found what I was looking for. It was a summoning jutsu that uses blood to find others with the same blood as the user. But to be on the safe side I decided to reverse summon and send me to the others. So I packed all the stuff I'd need, from ninja tools and gear, to clothing. I decided that I'd dress nice, so I wore my blue shirt, black shinobi pants, blue sandals, my headband and the Waterfall Village flak jacket I got from my mission there once. I cut my hand and set a return seal in my house so I could return home easier. I began the hand signs needed. Ninja art. Art of blood transportation, in that I was sent through a portal that lead to a place I really didn't want to be at. The place was all metal, stone, horrible smells, and noise. The people were strange looking to me, but I ignored them as I could feel the pull of something that led me to a smaller building. I walked up the stairs and walked down a hall till I got to an apartment door. Knocking, I was greeted by a small girl. Hi, is the adults home? I asked. Mom, there's somebody at the door, girl said. Yes, a woman said as she walked up to me. But then she grew widened eyes. Poseidon. No I'm not, but I could have some relation to him. You see, I'm trying to find my family. My name's Perseus. That caused her to burst into tears. Perseus, my baby boy. I tell ya, I was glad and creeped out when she hugged me, but I felt more of a warm comfort than anything. Mom, it's good to see you for the first time. May I come in? Oh yes, please do. I walked in and saw another little boy sitting on the rug. Mike, Rebecca, this is your older brother I thought was dead, my mom said. Well, that would explain a lot, I thought. So where did you go? You, Mike asked. I was in Konoha, you know, the life village in the land of fire where I'm a Anbu officer. Ah, where's that? Rebecca asked. What do you mean you should know where it is? It's one of the most famous village in the throughout the land. Never heard of it, Mike said. You got a world map? I asked. Yes, I'll get it, Mom said, leaving the room. Mom gave me a book of maps and to my surprise my village wasn't there. I searched the maps over and over, I even used my Sharingan to read them better. It's not there, I said, looking defeated. But how can that be? I've been living there for nearly 16 years. Percy, how old are you? My mom asked. Nearly 16. Why? You need to get to the camp. What camp? I asked. I was amazed by all the advancement of technology this world had, which isn't even my world. Mom used some metal cart and drove me to the woods. Well, this is we have to separate, my mom said, getting tears in her eyes. Mom, what's going on? I asked. Perseus Jackson, in those woods there is a camp where you will get more answers than I can. Okay Mom, but I will return to you, I said, hugging her before leaving to venture the woods. At the end was a small village-like camp. Hey, you stop, two twin boys said, walking up. Ah, Shinobi, can you take me to your leader? I have much to discuss with him. How you're not a spy? One asked. Spy for what? Unless you're enemies of Konoha, I have no reason to spy on you. So you are a war spy? The other said. War. The last great shinobi ended years ago and the Kiri village had just ended their civil war. We better take him to Chiron, one said. All right, move, and the other said, pushing me with the flat end of a sword. Touch me with that again and I'll shove it up your butt, I warned as I walked to the largest house there. Together we climbed the sand dunes. And a few hundred yards away, People were already streaming toward us, smiling and excited. I stopped at a pavilion and waited for the other members of this village to come. I gazed across the valley and tried to remember something that would help me have some form of relation to this place. But whenever I tried, as just thought of me and Rika running around being kids like we never got to be. From the pavilion, you could see pretty much everything: hills ringing the valley. On the tallest hill, a huge pine tree stood with a golden substance hanging from its branches. There was a dragon so big I could see him from here curled around the tree trunk. My guess he was the guard. To my right spread the woods. To my left, the lake glittered and a climbing wall glowed with what surprised me was lava pouring down its side. 12 cabins made a horseshoe pattern around that area. Farther south were some strawberry fields, and shack filled with weapons, thank you Sharingan, and a 4-story house with a sky blue paint job and a bronze eagle weather vane. In some ways, I felt a small sense of home. And I could see it in the faces of the people here that there was something major that they weren't telling me. Chiron the camp leader galloped into the pavilion first, which was easy for him since he's a white stallion from the waist down. His beard was wilder than anyone I've ever seen. He wore a green t-shirt that said "My other car is a centaur" and a bow slung over his back. "Greetings, young one. Okay, first off, I'm not young, I'm almost 16 and I killed a guy at age 5, so I don't think I am a young one," I stated. "Oh my. Did you just say you were almost 16? I then noticed a blonde beauty running in right behind him, and I'll admit my heart did a little relay race in my chest when I saw her. She didn't seem to care what clothes she was wearing, like the common old orange camp t-shirt and jeans, or bronze armor that many else wore. And her eyes were stormy gray that I won't lie, they were very beautiful for a girl that looked like she was from the Yamato clan. "What happened?" she asked before she grabbed my arm. "Who are you?" She finished looking over me. "The ship blew up," Chiron said, "but he wasn't destroyed, we don't know where. He was cut off as a girl far more beautiful appeared pushing through the crowd. Her hair wasn't combed and she wasn't wearing makeup like several others around her was." "Where's Charlie?" she demanded, looking around like he might be hiding. I glanced at Chiron like, what's going on? The old centaur cleared his throat. "Selena, my dear, let's talk about this at the big house." "No," she muttered. "No, no." She started to cry, and the rest of us stood around, too stunned to speak. So I decided to help. Getting out of the blonde girl's grip, I warped my arms around the girl Selena. I just lost my wife not too recently. She was the one person I knew was my whole life and love. So if you ever need someone to talk to, I'll be there for you, I said. Finally Clarice, as someone called her, came forward. I removed my arms so she could put her arm around Selena. This Clarice was dressed in blood-red combat armor, her brown hair tucked into a bandana. She was as big and beefy as a rugby player, with a permanent scowl on her face, but she spoke gently to Selena. "Come on, girl," she said. "Let's get to the big house. I'll make you some hot chocolate." Everyone turned and wandered off in 2s and 3s, heading back to the cabins. Nobody was excited to see me now. Only Yamato look-alike and Chiron stayed behind. Chiron put a hand on my shoulder. "Could you please tell us who you are? My name's Percy and you might want to gather everyone." Important sign, I don't like to repeat myself. I gazed down at the valley. "We must call a war council immediately, to discuss this spy, and other matters. One more thing." I took a deep breath. "When I talked to my mother, she said to tell you I need to know the prophecy." "Your mother?" the blonde girl asked. "A woman named Sally Jackson." Chiron's shoulders sagged, but he didn't look surprised. "I've dreaded this day." "Very well, Annabeth. We will show Perseus the truth, all of it. Let's go to the attic," Annabeth said. A ladder led up from the top of the staircase of the building and I wondered how Chiron was going to get up there, being half horse and all, but he didn't try. "You know where it is," he told Annabeth. "Bring it down, please." Annabeth nodded. "Come on, Percy." "Perseus, only my friends can call me Percy." "Whatever." The sun was setting outside, so the attic was darker and creepy. Old hero trophies were slacked everywhere, dented shields, pickled heads in jars from various monsters, a pair of fuzzy dice on a bronze plaque that read, "Stolen from Chrysaor's Honda Civic, by Gus, son of Hermes, 1988. I picked up a curved bronze sword so badly bent it looked like the letter M. I could see green stains on the metal. The tag was dated last summer. It read, "Scimitar of Camp, destroyed in the Battle of the Labyrinth." I remember Briars throwing those boulders, Annabeth said. Sounds like you've had some battle experience. Annabeth gave me a grudging smile. We locked eyes. I thought of how different my life would have been if I stayed in this world. She cleared her throat and looked away. Prophecy. Right. I put down the scimitar. Prophecy. We walked over to the window. On a three-legged stool sat the shriveled female mummy in a tie-dyed dress. Tufts of black hair clung to her skull. Glassy eyes stared out of her leathery face. Just looking at her made my skin crawl. "What is this thing?" I asked. "She's the Oracle," Annabeth said. "If you wanted to leave camp during the summer, it used to be you had to come up here to get a quest. This summer, that rule had been tossed. Campers left all the time on combat missions. We had no choice if we wanted to stop Kronos." "What aren't you telling me, Annabeth? Who's Kronos and what's this war about?" I demanded. Annabeth started to say something, and then apparently changed her mind. "Let's just do our job and get out of here." "So what now?" I stated, not liking this. Annabeth approached the mummy and held out her palms. "O Oracle, the time is at hand. I asked for the great prophecy." I braced myself, but the mummy didn't move. Instead, Annabeth approached and unclasped one of its necklaces. When Annabeth turned toward me, she was holding leather pouch. She opened the bag and took out a roll of parchment no bigger than her pinky. "Believe me, Percy, I read this when I was 10 years old, and I still have nightmares about it," Annabeth said. "So I killed a guy at age 5 and was a part of a lot of bloodshed, so I don't care. Let me read it now," I stated. "Downstairs at the War Council," Annabeth said. "Not in front of. You know." I looked at the glassy eyes of the Oracle, and I decided not to argue. We headed downstairs to join the others. I didn't know it then, but it would be the last time I ever visited the attic until that fateful night. Annabeth had told me that the people there were the senior counselors. They had gathered around a ping-pong table. When Annabeth, Chiron, and I came in, though, it looked more like a shouting match. Clarice was still in full battle gear. She had a spear strapped to her back. She also had a boar-shaped helmet under one arm and a knife at her belt. She was in the midst of yelling at some other kid. Which looked kind of funny since Clarice was a foot taller. The kid stood 4 feet 6, with another 2 feet of attitude. He reminded me of a ferret, with a pointy nose and scrunched-up features. "It's our loot," he yelled, standing on his tiptoes so he could get in Clarice's face. "If you don't like it, you can kiss my quiver." Around the table, people were trying not to laugh. Only Selena didn't pay any attention. She sat beside Clarice and stared vacantly at the ping-pong net. Her eyes were red and puffy. A cup of hot chocolate sat untouched in front of her. It seemed unfair that she had to be here. I couldn't believe Clarice and the kid was standing over her, arguing about something as stupid as loot, when she'd just lost someone close to her. "Stop it," I yelled. "What are you guys doing?" Clarice glowered at me. "Tell Michael not to be a selfish jerk." "Oh, that's perfect, coming from you," Michael said. "The only reason I'm here is to support Selena," Clarice shouted. "Otherwise I'd be back in my cabin." "What are you talking about?" I demanded. Another guy cleared his throat. "Clarice has refused to speak to any of us, until her, issue is resolved. She hasn't spoken for 3 days. It's been wonderful," one of the twins I meet said wistfully. "What issue?" I asked. Clarice turned to Chiron. "You're in charge, right? Does my cabin get what we want or not?" Chiron shuffled his hooves. "My dear, as I've already explained, Michael is correct. Apollo's cabin has the best claim. Besides, we have more important matters." "Sure," Clarice snapped. "Always more important matters than what Ares needs. We're just supposed to show up in light when you need us, and not complain." "That would be nice," the other twin muttered. Clarice gripped her knife. "Maybe I should ask Mr. D. As you know," Chiron interrupted, his tone slightly angry now, "our director, Dionysus, is busy with the war. He can't be bothered with this." "I see," Clarice said. "And the senior counselors? Are any of you going to side with me?" Nobody was smiling now. None of them met Clarice's eyes. "Fine." Clarice turned to Selena. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get into this when you've just lost. Anyway, I apologize. To you. Nobody else." Selina didn't seem to register her words, so Clarice threw her knife on the ping-pong table. All of you can fight this war without Ares until I get satisfaction. No one in my cabin is lifting a finger to help. Have fun dying. The counselors were all too stunned to say anything as Clarice stormed out of the room. Ag, you all are acting like studied academy runts, I spat, getting mad. Michael said. Good riddance. Are you kidding? A girl protested. This is a disaster. She can't be serious, TW.2 said. Can she? What are you talking about? Annabeth asked. Chiron sighed. Her pride has been wounded, she'll calm down eventually. But he didn't sound convinced. I wanted to ask what the heck Clarice was so mad about, but I looked at Annabeth and she mouthed the words, I'll tell you later. Now, Chiron continued, if you please, counselors. Perseus, our newfound friend has brought something I think you should hear. Perseus, the great prophecy. You do know I also have no idea what's going on here, I said as Annabeth handed me the parchment. It felt dry and old, and my fingers fumbled with the string. I uncurled the paper, trying not to rip it, and began to read. A half-blood of the eldest dogs. Perseus, Annabeth interrupted. That's gods, not dogs. I have been living in a place that only wrote in Japanese. Be glad I can speak English and read this, I said, a little annoyed at her. A half-blood of the eldest gods shall reach 16 against all odds. And see the world in endless sleep. The hero's soul, cursed blade shall reap. A single choice shall end his days. Olympus to preserve or raise. The room was silent. Finally Twin.1 said. Raise is good, isn't it? Not raise, Selina said. Her voice was hollow, but I was startled to hear her speak at all. Ra to Ze means destroy. Obliterate, Annabeth said. Annihilate. Turn to rubble. Got that, thanks, but I don't see how this has anything to do with me, I stated. Everybody was looking at me with concern, or pity, or maybe a little fear. Chiron closed his eyes as if he were saying a prayer. In hoarse form, his head almost brushed the lights in the room. You see now, Perseus, Chiron started gazing at me sadly. Perseus, Annabeth said, prophecies always have double meanings and we think we have an idea who you godly parent is. Yeah, my dad's Poseidon and I'm guessing he's the eldest god. He's one, Chiron said, and if you're his son and you're almost 16 then the prophecy is yours. Let's move on, I said. Indeed, we also got other problems. We've got a spy, Annabeth stated. Michael scowled. A spy. Selina started to cry again, and Annabeth put an arm around her shoulders that gave me some idea where to start looking. Well, Twin.1 said uncomfortably, we've suspected there might a spy for years, right? Somebody kept passing information to Luke like the location of the Golden Fleece a couple of years ago. It must be somebody who knew him well. Maybe subconsciously. He glanced at Annabeth but looked away quickly. I mean, it could be anybody. Yes. The girl that I now smelled of flowers frowned at the twin brothers. She seemed to dislike them. Like one of Luke's siblings. Both boys started arguing with her. Stop. Selina banged the table so hard her hot chocolate spilled. Charlie's dead and you're all arguing like little kids. She put her head down and began to sob. Hot chocolate trickled off the ping-pong table and everybody looked ashamed. She's right, the boy who smelled of grapes said at last. Accusing each other doesn't help. We need to keep our eyes open for a silver necklace with a scythe charm. If Kronos had one, the spy probably does too. Michael grunted. We need to find this spy before we plan our next operation. Blowing up the Princess Andromeda won't stop Kronos forever. No indeed, Chiron said. In fact, his next assault is already on the way. Tell me what's happened, I said. Chiron picked up a bronze goblet from the snack table. He tossed water onto a hot plate. Steam billowed up, making a rainbow in the fluorescent lights. Chiron fished a golden drachma out of his pouch, tossed it through the mist, and muttered. Oh Iris, goddess of the rainbow, show us the threat. The mist shimmered. I saw the image of a smoldering volcano mount as I watched. The side of the mountain exploded. Fire, ash, and lava rolled out. A newscaster's voice was saying. Even larger than last year's eruption, and geologists warn that the mountain may not be done. The mountain tore itself apart, collapsing inward, and an enormous form rose out of the smoke and lava like it was emerging from a manhole. I hoped the mist would keep the humans from seeing it clearly, because what I saw would have caused panic and riots across the entire United States. The giant was bigger than anything I'd ever encountered, and even my Sharingan eyes couldn't make out its exact form through the ash and fire, but it was vaguely humanoid and so huge it could have used the building as bat. The mountain shook with a horrible rumbling, as if the monster were laughing. Typhon, the most horrible monster of all, the biggest single threat the gods ever faced, someone said. He has been freed from under the mountain at last, but this scene is from 2 days ago. Here is what is happening today. Chiron waved his hand and the image changed. I saw a bank of storm clouds rolling across the Midwest plains. Lightning flickered. Lines of tornadoes destroyed everything in their path, ripping up houses and trailers, tossing cars around like matchbox toys. Monumental floods, an announcer was saying. 5 states declared disaster areas as the freak storm system sweeps east, continuing its path of destruction. The cameras zoomed in on a column of storm bearing down on some Midwest city. I couldn't tell which one. Inside the storm I could see the giant, just small glimpses of his true form. A smoky arm, a dark clawed hand the size of a city block. His angry roar rolled across the plains like a nuclear blast. Other smaller forms darted through the clouds, circling the monster. I saw flashes of light, and I realized the giant was trying to swat them. I squinted and thought I saw a golden chariot flying into the blackness. Then some kind of huge bird, a monstrous owl, dived in to attack the giant. Are those the gods you speak of? I asked. Yes, Percy, Chiron said. They have been fighting him for days now, trying to slow him down. But Typhon is marching forward toward New York. Toward Olympus. Most of the Olympians are there, except your father, who has a war of his own to fight. Who's guarding this Olympus? I asked, thinking no one would leave that important place alone. Twin Point One shook his head. If Typhon gets to New York, it won't matter who's guarding Olympus. It's a trick, I said. We have to warn the gods something else is going to happen. Chiron looked at me gravely. Something worse than Typhon? I hope not. Listen, during the Third Great Shinobi War Iwa used the same trick, so we have to defend Olympus, I insisted. This Kronos must have another attack planned. He did, Twin Point Two reminded me, but we sunk his ship. Everyone was looking at me. They wanted some good news. They wanted to believe that at least I'd given them a little bit of hope. But I wasn't going to say in front of Selena that her boyfriend had sacrificed himself for that mission. From what I've learned about his world, I may be the best chance you got, I said, not so sure. According to the ancient prophecy, I was going to die when I turned 16, which happened to be in 5 days, the exact same time Typhon was supposed to hit New York. Okay, who is this guy? Twin Point One asked, and I could see the others wanted that answer. I'm Perseus Jackson Uchiha, Anbu of Konoha. I was a member of the Third Great Shinobi War and the Kiri Civil War, where I was given the name Mizu no Kami. What does that mean? Michelle asked. God of Water, a title given to the one person with ungodly control of the water element. I killed a guy at age 5 and many more after that. I loved only one woman, a burning passion many of you will never understand in your lives. That's who I am, I concluded, leaving. Well, Chiron said, I think that's enough for one night. This war council is adjourned. The next day came faster than I had wanted. I was placed in the third cabin and had spent quite a lot of time getting the information on what was going on around this world. So it is like I lived here, and thanks to the shadow clone jutsu I got all the information I could and still get a night's sleep. I ate a depressing breakfast by myself at the Poseidon table. That was because this place was great and I wish I could have brought Rika here before she died. After breakfast, Annabeth and I walked down to inspect the cabins. Actually, it was Annabeth's job to inspect. I got off scot-free since I was new here. But since she hated her job and I didn't have much to do, we decided to do it together so it wouldn't be so heinous. We started at the Poseidon cabin, which was basically just me. I made my bunk bed that morning and straightened the place up via shadow clones, so I gave myself a 5 out of 5. Annabeth made a face. You're being generous. She used the end of her pencil to pull out my bag that had my ninja gear from under my bed. I snatched the bag away. Hey, give me a break. I just go here, so be glad it's this nice. Did she make you clean your room when you were younger? Who, my mom or Rika? Well, I didn't have a mom. I was an orphan. And yes, Rika would come over every 2 days and do a heavy search of my apartment. If she found even one little thing wrong, she'd unleash Uchiha hell onto me so I'd never make the same mistake twice. 4.5 out of 5, Annabeth said. I learned enough about her to know better than to argue, so we moved along. We visited the Aphrodite cabin, which of course got a 5 out of 5. The beds were perfectly made. The clothes in everyone's footlockers were color coordinated. Fresh flowers bloomed on the windowsills. I wanted to dock a point because the whole place reeked of designer perfume. That stuff could gag anyone and knock a Inuzuka clan member out for weeks. But Annabeth ignored me mainly because she didn't understand from a shinobi's point of view. Great job as usual, Selena, Annabeth said. Selena nodded listlessly. The wall behind her bed was decorated with pictures of the man Beckendorf. She sat on her bunk with a box of chocolates on her lap, and I remembered reading that her dad owned a chocolate store in the village, which was how he'd caught the attention of Aphrodite. You want a bonbon? Selena asked. My dad sent them. He thought they might cheer me up. Are they any good? I asked. She shook her head. They taste like cardboard. I didn't have anything against cardboard, so I tried one. Annabeth passed. Dang it. I cried as I went out the door and spat it out. I came back in and said, I thought you said it was chocolate. Not cardboard covered in mud. I earned a smile from both girls. I did, Selena said, a hint of joy in her voice. I sighed and pulled out my wallet and then pulled out a picture. On it was 2 teenage kids, a kid with blonde hair, and a teenage girl with long black hair, blue eyes, and a smirk that said I could beat you down without trying. How's this? That's Itachi, me, Naruto, and Rika. You'd have liked them, I said to Selena before showing the picture to Annabeth. So that was your wife? Annabeth asked. She kinda looks like Talia. Yeah, well listen Selena, if you need someone to talk to I'd be willing to help. I know what it's like to lose someone that's special to you. Thanks Selena said, trying to remember my name. Call me Percy, I said as we left the cabin. As we crossed the commons area, a fight broke out between the Ares and Apollo cabins. Some Apollo campers armed with firebombs flew over the Ares cabin in a chariot pulled by 2 Pegasi. I'd never seen a chariot like it before, but it looked like a pretty sweet ride. Soon, the roof of the Ares cabin was burning, and naiads from the canoe lake rushed over to blow water on it. Then the Ares campers called down a curse, and all the Apollo kids' arrows turned to rubber. The Apollo kids kept shooting at the Ares kids, but the arrows bounced off. 2 archers ran by, chased by an angry Ares kid who was yelling in poetry. Curse me, I'll make you pay, I don't want to rhyme all day. Annabeth sighed. Not that again. Last time Apollo cursed a cabin, it took a week for the rhyming couplets to wear off. What are they fighting about anyway? I asked. Annabeth ignored me while she scribbled on her inspection scroll, giving both cabins a 1 out of 5. I found myself observing her, as if I was waiting for a kill. She was shorter than me and had that composure that said I've been to hell and back. Finally she said, that flying chariot. What? You asked what they were fighting about. Oh, right. They captured it in a raid in Philadelphia last week. Some of Luke's demigods were there with that flying chariot. The Apollo cabin seized it during the battle, but the Ares cabin led the raid. So they've been fighting about who gets it ever since. We ducked as Michael used chariot dive-bombed an Ares camper. The Ares camper tried to stab him and cuss him out in rhyming couplets. He was pretty creative about rhyming those cuss words. You're fighting for your lives, I said, and they're bickering about some stupid chariot. They'll get over it, Annabeth said. Clarice will come to her senses. I wasn't so sure. That didn't sound like the Clarice I researched. We inspected as we continued on. Demeter got a 4. Hephaestus got a 3 and probably would have gotten lower, but with Beckendorf being dead and all, she cut them some slack. Hermes got a 2, which was no surprise. All campers who didn't know their godly parentage were shoved into the Hermes cabin, and since the gods were kind of forgetful, that cabin was always overcrowded. Even so they would never pass the Rika inspection. She'd give them a -10 and work them to the bone so hard they'd beg to be put down. Finally we got to Athena's cabin, which was orderly and clean. Books were straightened on the shelves. The armor was polished. Battle maps and blueprints decorated the walls. Only Annabeth's bunk was messy. It was covered in papers, and her silver laptop was still running. Vlakas, Annabeth muttered, which was basically calling herself an idiot in Greek. Her second in command, Malcolm, suppressed a smile. Yeah, we cleaned everything else. Didn't know if it was safe to move your notes. Be glad she's dead or you two would have all-out war, I whispered to Annabeth. Malcolm grinned at me. We'll wait outside while you finish inspection. The Athena campers filed out the door while Annabeth cleaned up her bunk. I pretended to be looking at something. Since even on inspection, it was against camp rules for two campers to be alone in a cabin. That rule had come up a lot when Selena and Beckendorf started dating. But hey, me and Rika weren't supposed to be married, but we did. Can tell me more about her? She asked as she closed her laptop. Well, she was 16, had a rebel personality, and was considered a goddess of her clan as she was amazing in beauty and power. How did you two meet? I was 7 or so and we meet at the Ninja Academy. Why, you ask? She shuffled her papers, mostly drawings of buildings and a bunch of handwritten notes. I knew she wanted to be an architect someday. She'd start talking about angles and load-bearing joints until my eyes glazed over. You know, she brushed her hair behind her ear, like she does when she's nervous. This whole thing with Beckendorf and Selena, it kind of makes you think. About what's important? About losing people who are important. I nodded. I guess, I stammered. Annabeth stared at her inspection scroll. 3 out 5, she muttered, for a sloppy head counselor. Come on, let's finish this report and get back to Chiron. On the way to the big house, I decide to speak my mind. Your camp is something else, especially for one in war. We'll just have to be ready. How? I said. Look at your camp. You can't even stop fighting each other. And I'm supposed to get my stupid soul reaped. You're in no position to fight a war. She threw down her scroll. I knew we shouldn't have shown you the prophecy. Her voice was angry and hurt. All it did was scare you. You're going to run away from this like you did before. Because you're scared. You know nothing about. I said, lower my head, holding in my anger. You think I would run away? She got right in my face. Yes, you're a coward, Percy Jackson. That was it. Who did this brat think she is? I was in the third great Shinobi and Kiri Civil War. I defeated the 4th Mizukage while he was in his full beast form. I was the Mizu no Kami for Kami's sake. Maybe I made a mistake in coming here or even returning to his pitiful world. If you don't like our chances, she said, maybe you should go back to your dead wife. That was the hammer that hit nail on the head. She could dog me, but you don't talk bad about Rika. Annabeth, if you don't like our company, I delivered a blow to the gut and sent her on her butt. My Sharingan activated before it changed to the Mangekyo Sharingan. Shino Tsukiyomi. True Tsukiyomi, I said, activating my eye's power. The power of my eyes is that it makes me an extremely powerful illusionist. One of the abilities is mind control. When my right eye appears with the mark of my Mangekyo, the same sign appears in my victims, but then disappears, and then the eyes are seeing what I want them to see. From what I knew about her, I deiced to use everything negative, fears, what she cared about, and he fatal flaw agents her. Let's bet it this way. She saw things like her mom disowning her and her friends either killed or turned on her. Then there was Luko. I had fun using that guy against her. And when I decided she had enough, I lifted my power on her. She was curled up into a ball, shivering in fear like a young child. What are you? She asked, cried. Your worst nightmare. If you ever slander Rika in any way and I hear about it, you'll find yourself in a hell that even Yami and Shinigami would beg to be let out of. I said to her before I walked away. I'd like to say my day got better from there. Of course it didn't. Annabeth told Chiron what I did and they tried to lock me up. But their jails and locks were so bad that a foul word can't even be used to describe them. After so many failures, they decided not to try and lock me up. Later that afternoon we had an assembly at the campfire to burn Beckendorf's burial shroud and say our goodbyes. Even the Ares and Apollo cabins called a temporary truce to attend. Beckendorf's shroud was made out of metal links, like chain mail. I didn't see how it would burn, but the fate must have been helping out. The metal melted in the fire and turned to golden smoke, which rose into the sky. The campfire flames always reflected the campers' moods, and today they burned black. Annabeth left without a word to me, but the fear was still there. A little fun fact is that even when I drop the jutsu, I can reuse it at my command whenever I want, even without my Sharingan making eye contact again. Most of the other campers drifted off to their afternoon activities and all avoided me. I just stood there staring at the dying fire. Selena sat nearby crying, while Clarice and her boyfriend, Chris Rodriguez, tried to comfort her. Finally I got up the nerve to walk over. "Hey, Selena. Back off, freak," Clarice said as if she was contemplating how to fight me. "In my world, power similar to it is no even to Genin." Selena sniffled. Clarice glared at me. Chris would barely look at me. He'd been one of Luke's lackeys until Clarice rescued him from the labyrinth. I cleared my throat. "Selena, you know Beckendorf carried your picture. He looked at it right before we went into battle. You meant a lot to him. You made the last year the best of his life." "How do you know that?" "Unless you were there." Clarice spat. "Demigod dream power," I said like she should have known. Selena sobbed. "Good work, Percy," Clarice muttered. "No, it's all right," Selena said. Thank you, Percy. I should go." "You want company?" Clarice asked. Selena shook her head and ran off. "She's stronger than she looks," Clarice muttered, almost to herself. "She'll survive. She reminds me of Rin, a old friend of mine, who was once a student of our fourth Hokage." Clarice went for her knife, but it wasn't there anymore. She'd thrown it on the ping-pong table in the big house. "What you're saying has nothing to do with us," she growled. "Yeah, I know you don't have shinobi. You got demigods who are weaker than a genin." She charged me, but Chris got between us. "Whoa, guys," he said. "Clarice, you know, he doesn't know what he's talking about. As you say these days." "Whatever," I said, walking away heading toward the sword fighting arena. I needed a break and I wanted to test this new sword Chiron gave me. I wanted to give a better understanding of Percy's and Rika's relationship for this chapter, as well as give you a glimpse of Percy's Mangekyo's power. Now I did have help with it, so I'd like to say thanks to Sunashi 777. Now then, remember, Percy's Sharingan power is from Rika. But due to the divine in his blood and the blood from Rika, he can not only use the Sharingan as good as a Uchiha. He doesn't have a high of risk of going blind. The jutsu is called Shino Tsukiyomi, True Tsukiyomi, which allows Percy to create powerful and real illusions. And only powerful genjutsu masters like Itachi can fight with him as an equal in that department. This method makes him an extremely powerful illusionist, powerful enough to deceive the most powerful censors. His illusions are even capable of imitating his opponent's fighting style and techniques. He is able to use his illusions to copy his opponent's abilities and weapons. With the Mangekyo Sharingan, he can create real objects or unique weapon. The power of the illusion is comparable in both appearance and power to the actual object. It is also possible for him to disable the illusions of other people. An example would be the mist will not work on him. Percy's illusions are so powerful that he can create real organs for people. I walked into the area and was suddenly attacked by what I thought was Bane at first. Bane is the chief wolf of the wolf summoning contract I signed years ago. He's about the same size of what attacked me. The thing was a hellhound the size of a garbage truck. Mrs. O'Leary, I believe. She saw me before I saw her, which is weird since I'm a shinobi. I walked into the arena, and a wall of darkness slammed into me. Woof. The next thing I knew, I was flat on the ground with a huge paw on my chest and an oversized Brillo pad tongue licking my face. "Ow," I said. "Down, girl." It took a few minutes for Mrs. O'Leary to calm down and get off me. By then I was pretty much drenched in dog drool. Her composure told me she wanted to play fetch, so I picked up a bronze shield and tossed it across the arena. She lived at camp, but Beckendorf, well, Beckendorf used to take care of her. He had smelted Mrs. O'Leary's favorite bronze chewing bone. He'd forged her collar with the little smiley face and a crossbones name tag. Next to the Angelos, Beckendorf had been her best friend. I threw the shield a few more times because Mrs. O'Leary insisted. Soon she started barking, a sound slightly louder than a coyote roaring, like she needed to go for a walk. The other campers didn't think it was funny when she went to the bathroom in the arena. It had caused more than one unfortunate slip and slide accident. So I opened the gates of the arena, and she bounded straight toward the woods. I jogged after her, not too concerned that she was getting ahead. I had by the completely forgotten why I went there for. Nothing in the woods could threaten Mrs. O'Leary. Even the dragons and giant scorpions ran away when she came close. When I finally tracked her down, she wasn't using the facilities. She was in a familiar clearing where the Council of Cloven Elders had once put Grover on trial. The place didn't look so good. The grass was yellow. 3 topiary thrones had lost all their leaves. But that's not what surprised me. In the middle of the glade stood the weirdest trio I'd ever seen. Juniper the tree nymph, Nico D'Angelo, and a very old, very fat satyr. Nico was the only one who didn't seem freaked out by Mrs. O'Leary's appearance. He looked pretty much like I'd read him to look like: an aviator's jacket, black jeans, and a t-shirt with dancing skeletons on it, like one of those Day of the Dead pictures. His Stygian iron sword hung at his side. He was only 12, but he looked much older and sadder. He nodded when he saw me, and then went back to scratching Mrs. O'Leary's ears. She sniffed his legs like he was the most interesting thing since ribeye steaks. Being the son of Hades, he'd probably been traveling in all sorts of hellhound-friendly places. The old satyr didn't look nearly so happy. "Will someone? What is this underworld creature doing in my forest?" He waved his arms and trotted on his hooves as if the grass were hot. "You there, Percy Jackson. Is this your beast?" "No, Linnaeus," I said. "This is Nico's and Bianca's." The satyr rolled his eyes. His fur was dust bunny gray, and a spiderweb grew between his horns. His belly would have made him an invincible bumper car. "Well, of course it is." "Hey, she was locked up," Nico said. "Well, call off your beast." "Woof," Mrs. O'Leary said happily. The old satyr gulped. "Make it go away, Juniper. I will not help you under these circumstances." "Mrs. O'Leary, come," a stern voice commanded. I turned to see a 14-year-old girl that radiated dark energy. "Bianca D'Angelo," I said. "Percy Jackson, the new golden boy," she said. "I take you've been watching me." Bianca petted her beast before giving a walk with me look. I followed and left the trio behind. Mrs. O'Leary following us. "I was first alerted to you when you used a dark magic that I still can't figure out." Bianca started. "After a while I found your energy signature and decided to probe you for information. You should be careful. Some things in my mind shouldn't ever be reviled." Quote. "Indeed. Now I come bearing an invitation. My father Lord Hades would like a word with you." "Yummy. What?" He wanted a word. Now he's got one. "Very funny," Bianca said, obviously annoyed with that comment. "Fine. But if he tries anything, I'm gone." "Fair enough," she said as Nico came to us. "So how did it go, little brother?" Nico chewed his lip. "That's not important right now. Percy, you know why we're here, right?" "Yeah, you daddy wants to speak to me." "But," I paused as I looked back toward the camp. Even from this distance I could hear the Ares and Apollo campers fighting again, yelling curses and spouting bad poetry. "They're no match for the Titan army," Nico said. "You know that. This comes down to you and Luke. And there's only one way you can beat Luke." "No, there is several ways to kill this brat. I have felt your powers and they are feeble compared to that of a shinobi. You heard the great prophecy. Unless you want to have your soul reaped by a cursed blade. You can't prevent a prophecy," I argued. "I already tried twice. But you can fight it." Nico had a strange, hungry light in his eyes. "You can become invincible." "No one's invincible. They always have a weakness." "Maybe. But for now we must leave for the underworld." Bianca stated, ready to leave. I didn't like the idea. Then I thought about Annabeth's comments, and I got angry. "All right," I decided. "What do we do first?" Nico's cold, creepy smile made me sorry I'd agreed. "First we'll need to retrace Luke's steps. We need to know more about his past, his childhood." Bianca added. "May Castellan. Lives in Connecticut. Once tried to become the Oracle after Luke was a baby. Went loopy after the spirit couldn't enter her. Still waits for her son to return to her after he ran away when he was really young. She has white hair stuck out in tufts all over her head, like someone who enjoyed sticking her fingers in electrical sockets. When she smiles, her face looks unnaturally stretched, and the high-voltage light in her eyes makes you wonder if she was blind. They both stared at me in disbelief. How do you know that? Bianca asked. Before a shinobi goes on missions, we learn about our target and those close to the mission. Okay, let's get moving to the entrance, Nico said. He whistled, and Mrs. O'Leary came loping out of the woods. Our friend here can help. Nico patted her head. You haven't tried shadow travel before, have you? Bianca asked me. No, I said. Nico whispered in Mrs. O'Leary's ear. She tilted her head, suddenly alert. Hop on board, Bianca told me. I'd never considered riding a dog before. I ride on Bane cause he's stupid fast. But Mrs. O'Leary was certainly big enough. I climbed onto her back and held her collar. This will make her very tired, Nico warned, so you can't do it often. And it works best at night. But all shadows are part of the same substance. There is only one. Darkness, and creatures of the underworld can use it as a road, or a door. Can we go now? I asked. Sure, just tell her where to go, Bianca said, heading for a shady tree. You're not coming. Don't worry, he said. We'll meet you there. I was a little nervous, but I leaned down to Mrs. O'Leary's ear and whispered the other entrance to the underworld to her. Mrs. O'Leary sniffed the air. She looked into the gloom of the forest. Then she bounded forward, straight into an oak tree. Just before we passed into shadows as cold as the dark side of the moon. In other words, I thought it was awesome. 1 minute I couldn't see anything. I could only feel Mrs. O'Leary's fur and my fingers wrapped around the bronze links of her dog collar. The next minute the shadows melted into a new scene. Mrs. O'Leary staggered. I remembered what Nico had said about shadow travel draining her, so I slipped off her back. She let out a huge toothy yawn that would have scared a T-Rex, then turned in a circle and flopped down so hard the ground, and Bianca appeared right next to me, as if the shadows had darkened and created him. He stumbled, but I caught his arm. Bianca just walked out like it was nothing. I'm okay, he managed, rubbing his eyes. How did you do that? Practice. A few times running into walls. A few accidental trips to China. Yeah, and if I hadn't gotten you back you'd be speaking Chinese, Bianca said, smiling and rubbing the boy's head. Mrs. O'Leary started snoring. If it hadn't been for the roar of traffic behind us, I'm sure she would have woken up the whole neighborhood. Are you going to take a nap too? I asked Nico. He shook his head. The first time I shadow traveled, I passed out for a week. Now it just makes me a little drowsy, but I can't do it more than once or twice a night. Mrs. O'Leary won't be going anywhere for a while, he added. What about you? I asked Bianca. Me. Well, I can travel well in the shadows, but after 5 trips it starts to wear on me. So where are we? I asked. A cozy campfire crackled behind us. We turned to see the fire in a ring of stones. A girl about 8 years old was sitting cross-legged behind us and smiled. The girl had mousy brown hair and a simple brown dress. She wore a scarf over her head so she looked like a pioneer kids I read about. She poked the fire with a stick, and it seemed to glow more richly red than a normal fire. Hello, she said. Nico and Bianca bowed to the little girl. Hello again, lady. She studied me with eyes as red as the firelight. I decided it was safest to bow. Sit, Percy Jackson, she said. Would you like some dinner? I hadn't eaten in a while, so I nodded yes. The girl waved her hand and a picnic appeared at the edge of the fire. There were plates of roast beef, baked potatoes, buttered carrots, fresh bread, and a whole bunch of other foods I hadn't had in a long time. My stomach started to rumble. It was the kind of home-cooked meal people are supposed to have but never do. The girl made a 5-foot-long dog biscuit appear for Mrs. O'Leary, awoke and started chewing on it. I sat next to Nico. We picked up our food, and I was about to dig in when I thought better of it. I scraped part of my meal into the flames, the way they do at camp. For the gods, all of them, I said. The little girl smiled. Thank you. As tender of the flame, I get a share of every sacrifice, you know. I recognize you now, I said. You're Hestia, the rightful 12 Olympian. You praise me like I am more than I am, the girl recalled sadly. Alas, most ignore me. Nico and Bianca talked to me. They were the first in many years. Everyone rushes about. No time for visiting family. Okay. So she looked 8 years old. I didn't ask. I'd learned that gods could look any way they pleased. My lady, Nico asked, why aren't you with the other Olympians, fighting Typhon? I'm not much for fighting. Her red eyes flickered. I realized they weren't just reflecting the flames. They were filled with flames. A warm and cozy feeling was to them. Besides, she said, someone has to keep the home fires burning while the other gods are away. So you're guarding Mount Olympus? I asked. Guard, may be too strong a word. But if you ever need a warm place to sit in a home-cooked meal, you are welcome to visit. Now eat. My plate was empty before I knew it. Nico scarfed his down just as fast and Bianca ate like a classy lady rather quickly. That was great, I said. Thank you, Hestia. I haven't had a meal like that in months, she nodded. Hestia then scratched behind Mrs. O'Leary's ears. The hellhound wagged her tail and accidentally knocked over a tree. I heard what you did to Annabeth. How she called you a coward and insulted the woman you love. Loved. Hestia, I loved her, but now she's dead and I will not do anything to change that. Oh, why's that? Bianca asked. Because if I ever tried, she would unleash the tortures of hell upon me for even trying. She sounds special. She was Hestia, but now I'm single again. My best friend Itachi is missing, and I have another war to fight. I'm never getting married if this is what happens after your wife dies. Nico. Bianca hissed and hit him upside the head. Hestia opened her hand and the fire roared. Flames shot 30 feet into the air. Heat slapped me in the face. Then the fire died back down to normal. Not all powers are spectacular. Hestia looked at me. Sometimes the hardest power to master is the power of yielding. Do you believe me? I do, I said. It was one thing being a shinobi Anbu is drilled into you. The goddess smiled. You are a good hero, Percy Jackson. Not too proud. I like that, but you have much to learn. When Dionysus was made a god, I gave up my throne for him. It was the only way to avoid a civil war among the gods. It unbalanced the council, I remembered. Hestia shrugged. It was the best solution, not a perfect one. Now I tend the fire. I fade slowly into the background. No one will ever write epic poems about the deeds of Hestia. Most demigods don't even stop to talk to me. But that is no matter. I keep the peace. I yield when necessary. Can you do this? I can if I must for the sake of the mission. She studied me. It seems the world Kami and his family control has had a larger effect on you. But maybe it is for the best. Are you here to warn me against going? Hestia shook her head. I am here because when all else fails, when all the other mighty gods have gone off to war, I am all that's left. Home, hearth. I am the last Olympian. You must remember me when you face your final decision. Okay, I said. Tell me the eye power, is it the Sharingan? Yes, how do you? I'm guessing Itachi or Rika were Uchihas. Lady Hestia, how do you know about this power of his? Bianca asked. It was long ago and once the gods were given a vision of two saviors. Born of different worlds, raised in the same, but ours returns to us with the power to reshape the world. The three of us looked baffled by this. The gods don't remember this, but I held it close to me for years waiting. Okay, what now? I asked. Here, read this, Hestia said, handing me a scroll. I opened it and inside it read. The Son of Sea will save the world, but only for an ancient evil waiting to rise. Offer you life to save the world and claim your prize. The Son of Red Death and Yellow Flash must be trained. Only through a brother will try power be gained. War will return to the worlds of pain. And the god of water may get drained. Only by unity will you end this trend. Look to the sky and see the heroes of these new legends. I looked at Nico, then Bianca, and then back at Hestia's warm glowing eyes. It's a prophecy, I said. Indeed, your new prophecy. There is more going on, Percy, and you have yet to find out. Well then, I have to continue, my lady. I have to stop Kronos. Hestia nodded. Very well. I cannot be of much assistance, beyond what I have already told you. I will see you again, Percy, on Olympus. Her tone was ominous, as though our next meeting would not be happy. The goddess waved her hand, and everything faded. Sorry, girl, I said. Shadow travel time again. She whimpered and crossed her paws over her snout. Where to now? I asked Nico. The main gate in Los Angeles that I read about. No need, Bianca said. There's a closer entrance to the underworld. We emerged in Central Park just north of the pond. Mrs. O'Leary was tired as she limped over to a cluster of boulders. She started sniffing around, and Nico said, "It's okay. She just smells the way home." "So how do we open it?" I asked. "We need music," Nico said. "How's your singing?" "I don't sing." "Now if you have a sitar or stringed instrument I could play that." "Well, it's a good thing I was sent with this," a new voice said. We turned and I saw a blonde-haired boy about 14 years old. He was handsome, with tidily cropped golden blonde hair, bright sky blue eyes, and a scar on the corner of his lip. He is about several inches shorter than me, with athletic build and muscular tanned arms. He has a tattoo burned on his forearm. 10 straight lines like a barcode with an eagle and the letters, SPQR, over the lines. "Who are you?" I asked. "Jason Grace, son of Jupiter, the Lord of the Sky and King of the Gods." "What are you doing here, Grace?" Bianca hissed. "My father sent me to help some guy named Percy." "Well, you want to help give me the guitar?" I asked. He did, and I stung some notes and played an old song I learned in my childhood. Once I was finished and the doors opened, Nico and I roused Mrs. O'Leary from her nap. When she smelled the tunnel, she got excited and led the way down the steps. It was a pretty tight fit. I hoped she wouldn't get stuck. I couldn't imagine how much butter we'd need to unstick a hellhound wedged halfway down a tunnel to the underworld. "Ready?" Bianca asked me. I shook my head no. "It'll be fine. Don't worry." She sounded like he was trying to convince herself. "All right, let's go," I said as we entered. The stairs went on forever, narrow, steep, and slippery. It was completely dark, so I had to use some fire jutsu and make a torch. I tried to go slow, but Mrs. O'Leary had other ideas. She bounded ahead, barking happily. The sound echoed through the tunnel like cannon shots, and I figured we would not be catching anybody by surprise once we reached the bottom. "So what's your story?" I asked Jason. "I'm the praetor of Camp Jupiter." I know what it is. I read all the files that the gods have to offer." "That was a lot, by the way." "Well, I'm also the younger brother of Talia Grace, daughter of Zeus and lieutenant of the goddess Artemis," I added. "Is there anything you don't know?" Nico asked. "Only you guys' skills," I stated. "Glad to know you don't know everything about us," Bianca stated. "Like how Jason once tried to eat a stapler." "Hey, how do you know that?" he asked. "I found your sister's old dairy in the Zeus cabin." "You perv." "Oh, but you have yet to meet the great and legendary super perv," I said, mimicking Jiraiya. The room was filled with laughter as I even got his stance down right. After a while I noticed Nico was lagging behind, which I thought was strange. "You okay?" I asked him. "Fine," but the expression on his face was doubt. "Just keep moving," he said. We followed Mrs. O'Leary into the depths. After another hour, I started to hear the roar of a river. We emerged at the base of a cliff, on a plain of black volcanic sand. To our right, the river Styx gushed from the rocks and roared off in a cascade of rapids. To our left, far away in the gloom, fires burned on the ramparts of Erebus, the great black walls of Hades's kingdom. Nico looked pale and worried. Mrs. O'Leary acted happy. She ran along the beach, picked up a random human leg bone, and romped back toward me. She dropped the bone at Bianca's feet and waited for her to throw it. "Maybe later, girl," Bianca said as I stared at the dark waters, trying to get up my nerve. "So, Nico, how do we do this?" "We have to go inside the gates first," he said. We followed him down the beach towards the big black gates. Lines of the dead stood outside waiting to get in. It must have been a heavy day for funerals, because even the ex-death line was backed up. "Woof," Mrs. O'Leary said. Before I could stop her, she bounded toward the security checkpoint. Cerberus, the guard dog of Hades, appeared out of the gloom, a 3-headed Rottweiler so big he made Mrs. O'Leary look like a toy poodle. Cerberus was half transparent, so he's really hard to see until he's close enough to kill you. But he acted like he didn't care about us. He was too busy saying hello to Mrs. O'Leary. "Man, that is a big dog," I shouted. "Only time I've seen one that big is when Bane goes giant." Nico smiled. Then he looked at me and his expression turned all serious again, like he'd remembered something unpleasant. "Come on. They won't give us any trouble in the line." You're with us. I didn't like it. He was hiding something and I lagged behind the rest and pulled out a small scroll. We slipped through the security ghouls and into the fields of Asphodel. Bianca had to whistle for Mrs. O'Leary 3 times before she left Cerberus alone and ran after us. We hiked over black fields of grass dotted with black poplar trees. Nico trudged ahead, bringing us closer and closer to the palace of Hades. Mrs. O'Leary growled. A shadow appeared overhead, something dark, cold, and stinking of death. It swooped down and landed in the top of a poplar tree. Unfortunately, I recognized her. She had a shriveled face, a horrible blue knit hat, and a crumpled velvet dress. Leathery bat wings sprang from her back. Her feet and sharp talons, and in her brass, clawed hands she held a flaming whip and a paisley handbag. Alecto, the fury I read about, I said. She bared her fangs. Welcome, honey. Her toe-sitters, the other furies, swooped down and settled next to her in the branches of the poplar. Nico nodded like this didn't surprise him. He looked up at the furies and took a deep breath. I've done what my father asked. Take us to the palace. Percy, our father, promised me information about our family, but he wants to see you before we try the river. Bianca said. Just don't try anything, Jason warned. They swooped down and plucked us up by the arms, and before I knew it, I was dangling 60 feet in the air. Oh, don't struggle, honey, the hag cackled in my ear. I'd hate to drop you. Mrs. O'Leary barked angrily and jumped, trying to reach us, but we were too high. Mrs. O'Leary, behave, Nico warned. He was hovering near me in the clutches of the third fury. She whimpered and turned in circles, looking up at me. Alecto dropped me like a sack of turnips in the middle of the palace garden. It was beautiful in a creepy way. Skeletal white trees grew from marble basins. Flower beds overflowed with golden plats and gemstones. A pair of thrones, one bone and one silver, sat on the balcony with a view of the fields of Asphodel. It would have been a nice place to spend a Saturday morning except for the sulphurous smell and the cries of tortured souls in the distance. Skeletal warriors guarded the only exit. They wore tattered U.S. Army Desert Combat fatigues and carried M16s. The third fury deposited Nico next to me. Then Jason and Bianca followed. Then all 3 of them settled on the top of the skeletal throne. I stared at the empty thrones, waiting for something to happen. Then the air shimmered. 3 figures appeared, Hades and Persephone on their thrones, and an older woman standing between them. They seemed to be in the middle of an argument. Told you he was a bum. The older women said. Mother. Persephone replied. We have visitors. Hades barked. Please. Hades smoothed his black robes, which were filled with the terrified faces of the damned. He had a pale skin and the intense eyes of a madman. The infamous Percy Jackson, he said with satisfaction. At last. Queen Persephone studied me curiously. She had lustrous black hair and warm brown eyes. Her dress shimmered with colors. Flower patterns in the fabric changed and bloomed: roses, tulips, honeysuckle. The woman standing between them was obviously Persephone's mother. She had the same hair and eyes, but looked older and sterner. Her dress was golden, the color of a wheat field. Her hair was woven with dried grasses, so it reminded me of a wicker basket. I figured if somebody lit a match next to her, she'd be in serious trouble. HMPH, the older women said. Demigods. Just what we need. Next to me Nico, Jason, and Bianca knelt. Father, Nico said, I have done as you asked. Took you long enough, Hades grumbled. Nico lowered his head. I glared up at the god of the dead. What do you want, Hades? To talk, of course. The god twisted his mouth into a cruel smile. Didn't they tell you? So what do you want? I hope they haven't brought me down here to get me killed. Oh, no, Hades said. I'm afraid my dear kids were quite sincere about wanting to help you. They are as honest as they is dense. I simply convinced them to take a small detour and bring you here first. Father, Bianca pleaded, you promised that Percy would not be harmed. You said if we brought him, you would tell us about our past, about our mother. Queen Persephone sighed dramatically. Can we please not talk about that woman in my presence? I'm sorry, my dove. Hades said. I had to promise the girl something. The older lady harumphed. I warned you, daughter. This scoundrel Hades is no good. You could have married the gods of doctors or the god of lawyers, but no, you had to eat the pomegranate. Mother. And get stuck in the underworld. Mother, please. And here it is August, and do you come home like you're supposed to? Do you ever think about your poor lonely mother? Demeter. Hades shouted. That is enough. You are a guest in my house. Oh, a house is it? She said. You call this dump a house? Make my daughter live in this dark, damp. I told you, Hades said, grinding his teeth, there's a war in the world above. You and Persephone are better off here with me. Ha 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 ha, I broke in. If you're going to bicker, we could come back later. All three gods looked at me. Well, this one has an attitude, Demeter observed. Indeed, Hades agreed. I'd love to kill him. Father, Nico said, you promised. Husband, we talked about this, Persephone chided. You can't go around incinerating every hero. Besides, he's brave. I like that. Hades rolled his eyes. You like the Orpheus fellow too. Look how well that turned out. Let me kill him, just a little bit. Try to kill him and I'll cut your head off. Jason broken in. Well, it seems my brother decided to send his Roman brat. Hades said. Father, you promised. Nico said. You said you only wanted to talk to him. You said if we brought him, you'd explain. Hades glowered, smoothing the folds of his robes. And so I shall. Your mother, what can I tell you? She was a wonderful woman. He glanced uncomfortably at Persephone. Forgive me, my dear. I mean for a mortal, of course. Her name was Maria D'Angelo. She was from Venice, but her father was a diplomat in Washington, D.C. That's where I met her. When you and your sister young, it was a bad time to be children of Hades. World War II was brewing. A few of my, other, children were leading the losing side. I thought it best to put you two out of harm's way. That's why you hid us in the Lotus Casino. Bianca stated, getting up. Hades shrugged. You didn't age. You didn't realize time was passing. I waited for the right time to bring you out. But what happened to our mother? Why don't I remember her? Not important, Hades snapped. What? Of course it's important. And you had other children. Why were we the only ones who were sent away? And who was the lawyer who got us out? Nico asked. Hades gritted his teeth. You would do well to listen more and talk less, boy. As for the lawyer, Hades snapped his fingers. On top of his throne, the Fury Electo began to change until she was a middle-aged man in a pinstriped suit with a briefcase. He looked strange crouching at Hades's shoulder. You, Nico said. The Fury cackled. I do lawyers and teachers very well. Nico was trembling. But why did you free us from the casino? Bianca asked. You know why, Hades said. This idiot son of Jupiter cannot be allowed to be the child of the prophecy. Jason plucked a ruby of the nearest plant and threw it at Hades. It sank harmlessly into his robe. You should be helping Olympus, he said. All the other gods are fighting Typhon, and you're just sitting here. Waiting things out, Hades finished. Yes, that's correct. When's the last time Olympus ever helped me, half-blood? When's the last time a child of mine was ever welcomed as a hero? Bah, why should I rush out and help them? I'll stay here with my forces intact. And when Kronos comes after you, let him try. He'll be weakened. And my daughter here, Bianca, will turn 16, and the prophecy says, and then she will make the decision that will save the world. And I will be king of the gods. You're crazy, I said. Kronos will crush you, right after he finished pulverizing Olympus. Hades spread his hands. Well, you'll get a chance to find out, half-blood. Because you'll both be waiting out this war in my dungeons. No, Nico said. Father, that wasn't our agreement. And you haven't told me everything. I've told you all you need to know, Hades said. As for our agreement, I spoke with Jackson. I did not harm him. You got your information. If you had wanted a better deal, you should have made me swear on the sticks. Now go to your rooms. He waved his hand and Nico and Bianca vanished. Those brats needs to eat more, Demeter grumbled. They're too skinny. They need more cereal. Persephone rolled her eyes. Mother, enough with the cereal. My lord Hades, are you sure we can't let these heroes go? They're awfully brave. No, my dear, I've spared their life. That's enough. I was sure she was going to stand up for Jason and me. The brave and beautiful Persephone was going to get us out of this. She shrugged indifferently. Fine. What's for breakfast? I'm starving. Cereal, Demeter said. Then they noticed something was off. It was raining soccer leaves. What the? Hades asked. Before he knew it, a masked man nearly took him head off, but of course he ducked. Nice dodge, the figure said with no emotion. He was dressed in black Anbu gear, a wolf Anbu mask, and some added gear that made him look like he was a mercenary. Consider that a warning, cause next time I will go for your head. Because I will not be locked up. Percy then exploded in smoke to reveal he was a clone. Bad choice, kid, now I can kill you. Hades hissed, transforming his clothes into armor and drawing his sword. Just try, I whispered flatly and drew the riptide sword. Our swords clashed and sparks flew. You're already in my trap and you don't even know. Shino Tsukiyomi. Ah, Hades cried and held his eyes in pain. Earth style. Earth flow river, I said. After forming the needed hand seal, then I transformed the ground underneath my opponent into a river of mud that threw him off balance and away from me. Earth style. Earth dragon bullet. This technique created a dragon-like head that fired balls of mud at Hades. Enough, Hades roared. It shattered the jutsu's attack. He then charged at me and surprisingly knocked my sword out of my hands. He then knocked me down and raised his sword above me as if to cut me down. No, Jason cried, about to attack but was held back by Persephone. Stay out of this, she warned. As I laid there, a feeling of pain in every cell in his body erupted in my body. A blue flame erupted over my body, then forming over me. When the sword Hades swung at me came, I held my arms to block. A black armor had formed onto my body, and I knew from that I evolved my Mangekyo Sharingan to a new limit. The Susanoo, I said, surprised that the armor blocked the black sword. The Susanoo was formed through the materialization of my chakra, and I felt mine increase immensely. My turn, I said, getting up. Yusaka Magatama. Through the use of Susanoo, I was able to create the Yusaka Magatama from my hands. It was comprised of a single Magatama to several bound together through their respective centers by a thread of chakra. Due to this structure, the tools act in a similar manner to that of a shuriken when thrown by a Susanoo, or in this case a guy in Susanoo armor. I tossed it and it rapidly sped towards Hades, and as a result in a powerful collision upon impact. Arg! Hades cried, fling back. Don't think this is over, I said, and activated an explosive tag on his throne. That sent Hades fling back towards me and Demeter and Persephone into the garden. I held my arm out, stopping him and the slamming him down to the ground. I raised my hand and a solid illusion of the Kubikiribocho blade formed in my hand. Stand down, I ordered. Never, he roared, turning into birds and the reforming as himself to attack me from above. Die, he cried. I held the blade up and blocked the attack. The ground underneath me was forced down, making it into a crater. I forced him back and he shot at me again and pierced my chest. I held the blade before I grabbed onto it. I stood behind Hades watching him stand there holding his blade like he had stabbed something. I held Riptide in my hand and impaled his right shoulder. The illusion shattered before Hades and he looked at me in disbelief. How? My Mangekyo Sharingan's power, the Shino Tsukiyomi, is true perfect illusions. You never stood a chance against me. Water style. Water snake's mouth. A large amount of water formed from the air. That then transforms itself into the shape of a snake and crashes down on Hades, literally swallowing him. After it swallowed him, it turned into a river. Never underestimate the Mizu no Kami. I finished flatly powering down the Susanoo. Hades' body floated up and I knew he was out. I took my mask off, looked down and saw my reflection. I looked more like an Uchiha with my hair spiked some and grown out. My Mangekyo looked like a three-pointed Sharingan that made a shuriken. I had to wonder what the Sharingan was doing to me. I heard Jason shot up for air and I turned to face him. You okay? I asked. Ah, fine. For now, he said, trying to breath. I smirked and helped him up from the water that was up to my knees. What was that? The power of a shinobi. I told him. Sigh. Jack. CKSON. Pluto said, emerging from the water looking pitiful. You have beaten my Greek side. That is no small feat. Pluto said, sitting in the water. Pluto must ask a favor of you. In a hidden room of my palace there is a soul I beg you to take with you when you leave. Why, she is as important to me as any child could be to a father. Tell me her name, I asked, Sharingan staring at him. Hazel Levesque. With that he passed out. I hate when you need a sensor-type shinobi and you don't have one. We searched for some time before finding a room hidden in the mist. I guess this is it? Jason asked. Here's to hopping, I said, opening the door. Inside was a large room filled with all kinds of valuable metals and gems. In the front of the room was a queen-size bed with a young girl laying on the bed as if waiting to be awakened. Don't touch anything, I warned Jason as we walked to the bed. Hazel Levesque, I asked the young girl. She shot up and caught my mouth with hers. I pulled away in shock. Ah, who are you two? Where am I? Why did you kiss me? She asked rather quickly. Hold up, you kissed me, I stated. Also, I'm Percy Uchiha, son of Poseidon or Neptune, and this is Jason Grace, son of Jupiter. We were sent by your dad Pluto to get you out of here. A descendant of Neptune? She asked, eyes widened. Yeah, why? I asked, going to reach for a sapphire. No, don't, she said, grabbing my hand. Why? I asked. I have a curse and these are part of them. If you take one you will suffer, she said, practically crying. A curse from a death god? Yes, she said, saddened. Percy, what are you thinking? Jason asked me. Shino Tsukiyomi. I turned from them and when I refaced them, I was wearing a copy of the Shinigami mask. With it I saw a dark aura around the room and a darker on Hazel. Hold still. I inhaled and the aura was sucked down my thought like a vacuum. When it was done I waved my hand in front of my face and the mask faded away. What did you do? Jason asked. I used the illusion of a Uzumaki mask that allows the wearer to handle thing of death. I sucked the death curse from this stuff in Hazel. Hazel's eyes widened and I could tell she knew it was true. You really did it, she cried, leaping into my arms and cried tears of joy onto my chest. Come on, let's get you out of here, I said. Jason and Hazel nodded their heads and we left the room. We ran through the place for a bit before I ran into Bianca. Ah, she said, being knocked over. Bianca, Jason said, surprised. Hey guys, Nico said, scared I might do something to him. Okay, from what I've learned we got several days to prepare for this war, I said, helping Bianca up. And, Bianca asked, I say we give Kronos a surprise. Kronos, Hazel asked. Saturn, I told Hazel. How? Jason asked. I'm going to unlock your U chakra, I said, putting my hands behind my back. I then smirked as small flames ignited on my fingers. Jason, Nico, raise your hands up, I ordered. They looked at me weird, but did. 5 bomb seal release. I slammed my palms onto their guts and they held them like I stabbed them. Why? Nico asked in pain. Hold on, I said, quickly hitting Bianca and Hazel with the same. All were laying before me, staring in my eyes. Shino Tsukiyomi. When they regained consciousness they were different. They were like me, shinobi. The first of their kind here. Bianca, Hazel, you two stay here and try to get your father to help the gods and find out as much as you can. Hi, they said, disappearing. You two will come with me to help defend Olympus, I stated. But what about? Jason started. I will handle that, I said, leading us out. It took some time but we finally got out of the underworld. I got to say, I love New York. You can pop out of the underworld, hail a ride, head down 5th Avenue with a giant hellhound loping along behind you, and nobody even looks at you funny. Thank the gods for the mist. People probably couldn't see Mrs. O'Leary, or maybe they thought she was a large, loud, very friendly truck. It was late afternoon when the taxi dropped us at the Empire State Building. Mrs. O'Leary bounded up and down 5th Avenue, licking cabs and sniffing hot dog carts. Nobody seemed to notice her, although people did swerve away and look confused when she came close. Nico whistled for her to heel as 3 white vans pulled up to the curb. They said Delphi Strawberry Service, which was the cover name for Camp Half-Blood. Though I knew they shuttled our fresh produce into the city. The first van was driven by Argus, our many-eyed security chief. The other 2 were driven by Harpies, who are basically demonic human chicken hybrids with bad attitudes. The doors slid open. A bunch of campers climbed out, some of them looking a little green from the long drive. Chiron came out of the van last. His horse half was compacted into his magic wheelchair, so he used the handicap lift. The Ares cabin wasn't here, but I tried not to get too angry about that. Clarice was too stubborn. I did a head count. 40 campers in many to fight a war, but it was still the largest group of half-bloods I'd ever seen gathered in one place outside camp. Everyone looked nervous, and I understood why. We were probably sending out so much demigod aura that every monster in the northeastern United States knew we were here. As I looked at their faces, all these campers I'd known for so many summers, a nagging voice whispered in my mind, "One of them is a spy." But I couldn't dwell on that. They were my squad. I needed them. Annabeth came up to me. Obviously she was still afraid of me, but she was their second in command and was the one who seemed brave enough to talk to me at the moment. She was dressed in black camouflage with her celestial bronze knife strapped to her arm and her laptop bag slung over her shoulder, ready for stabbing or surfing the internet, whichever came first. She frowned. "What is it? What's what?" I asked. "You're looking at me funny." I smirked. I grabbed hold of her and tipped her. "Ah, madam, I cannot hide it any longer," I said in a French accent. "You have haunted my mind for so long now. I love you, and I must have you." She blushed redder than blood. I lowered my head to kiss her. She seemed to want it, and I moved my head to whisper in her ear. "Maybe in 5 years," I said, dropping her. Lesson number 1. A shinobi is a master of forcoming everybody. "Chiron, after you." My old man shook his head. "I came to wish you luck, my boy. But I make it a point never to visit Olympus unless I am summoned." "Sure," he smiled. "I am a trainer. That is not the same as being your leader. I will go gather what allies I can. It may not be too late to convince my brother centaurs to help. Meanwhile, you called the campers here, Percy. You are the leader." Great, it's Kiri all over again. Everybody was looking at me expectantly, even Annabeth, who just got up. "Fine, but if they are to serve with me, you must do as I say. Now I'm sure you all know Nico, son of the underworld. And this is Jason, son of the sky god. Also, something bad is going to happen by tonight. Some kind of trap. We've got to get an audience with Zeus and convince him to defend the city. Remember, we can't take no for an answer." Nico asked Argus to watch Mrs. O'Leary, which neither of them looked happy about. "Let's go," I told the campers. A security guard was sitting behind the desk in the lobby, reading a big black book with a flower on the cover. He glanced up when we all filed in with our weapons and armor clanking. "School group, we're about to close up." "No," I said. 600th floor. He checked us out. His eyes were pale blue and his head was completely bald. He noticed our weapons, so he wasn't fooled by the mist. "There is no 600th floor, kid." He said it like it was a required line he didn't believe. "Move along." I leaned across the desk. "Have it your way, Shino Tsukiyomi." He hit a buzzer and the security gate swung open. "Go on up, sir. You don't want us going through the metal detectors," I added. No," he agreed. "Elevator on the right. I guess you know the way." We marched on through, deciding it would take 2 trips to get everybody up in the elevator. I went with the first group. Horrible elevator music was playing. A old disco song, "Stayin' Alive." A terrifying image flashed through my mind of Itachi in bell-bottom pants and a slinky silk shirt. I was glad when the elevator doors finally dinged open. In front of us, a path of floating stones led through the clouds up to Mount Olympus, hovering 6,000 feet over Manhattan. Olympus took my breath away. The mansions glittered gold and white against the sides of the mountain. Gardens bloomed on 100 terraces. Scented smoke rose from braziers that lined the winding streets. And right at the top of the snow-capped crest rose the main palace of the gods. It looked as majestic as ever, but something seemed wrong. Then I realized the mountain was silent, no music, no voices, no laughter. Annabeth studied me. "You look different," she decided. "Where exactly did you go?" The elevator doors opened again, and the second group of half-bloods joined us. "Tell you later," I said. "Come on." We made our way across the sky bridge into the streets of Olympus. The shops were closed. The parks were empty. A couple of muses sat on a bench strumming flaming lyres, but their hearts didn't seem to be in it. A lone cyclops swept the street with an uprooted oak tree. A minor godling spotted us from a balcony and ducked inside, closing his shutters. We passed under a big marble archway with statues of Zeus and Hera on either side. Annabeth made a face at the Queen of the Gods. "Hate her," she muttered. "Has she been cursing you or something?" I asked. "Just little stuff so far," she said. "Her sacred animal is the cow, right? Right, so she sends cows after me." I tried not to smile. So I laughed. "Ha, cows. In San Francisco? Oh, yeah, usually I don't see them, but the cows leave me little presents all over the place in our backyard, on the sidewalk, in the school hallways. I have to be careful where I step." "Look," Pollux cried, pointing toward the horizon. "What is that?" We all froze. Blue lights were streaking across the evening sky toward Olympus like tiny comets. They seemed to be coming from all over the city, heading straight toward the mountain. As they got close, they fizzled out. We watched them for several minutes and they didn't seem to do any damage, but still it was strange. "Like infrared scopes," Michael Yu muttered. "We're being targeted." "Get the hell out of here," I roared. They all ran to the palace. No one was guarding the Hall of the Gods. The gold and silver doors stood wide open. Our footsteps echoed as we ran into the throne room. Of course, room doesn't really cover it. The place was the size of Madison Square Garden. High above, the blue ceiling glittered with constellations. 12 giant empty thrones stood in AU around a one corner. A house-sized globe of water hovered in the air, and inside swam my old friend the Ophiuchus, half cow, half serpent. "Moo," he said happily, turning in a circle. Despite all the serious stuff going on, I had to smile. The Ophiuchus was a pure spirit and I had to smile. He seemed to like me too. "Hey, there," I said. "They treating you okay?" "Moo." Bessie walked toward the thrones, and a woman's voice said. "Hello again, Percy Jackson. You and your friends are welcome." Hestia stood by the hearth, poking the flames with a stick. She wore the same kind of simple brown dress as she had before, but she was a grown woman now. I bowed. "Lady Hestia." My friends followed my example. Hestia regarded me with her red glowing eyes. "I see you went through a new transformation. You bear the curse of Susano." The other campers started muttering among themselves. What did she say? What curse? Who's Susano? "You must be careful," Hestia warned me. "You gained much on your journey. But you are still blind to the most important truth." Annabeth nudged me. What is she talking about?" I glanced at Hestia, but the goddess's face was expressionless. Lady Hestia," I said, "we've come on urgent business. We need to see." "We know what you need," a man's voice said. I shuddered, because it was the same voice I'd heard in the vision. A god shimmered into existence next to Hestia. He looked about 25, with curly salt and pepper hair and elfish features. He wore a military pilot's flight suit, with tiny birds' wings fluttering on his helmet and his black leather boots. In the crook of his arm was a long staff entwined with 2 living serpents. "I will leave you now," Hestia said. She bowed to the aviator and disappeared into smoke. I understood why she was so anxious to go. Hermes, the god of messengers, did not look happy. "Hello, Perseus." His brow furrowed as though he was annoyed with me, and I wondered if he somehow knew about the vision I'd just had. I bowed. "Lord Hermes." "Oh, sure," one of the snakes said in my mind. "Don't say hi to us. We're just reptiles." "George," the other snake scolded. "Be polite." "Hello, George," I said. "Hey, Martha. Did you bring us a rat?" George asked. "George, stop it," Martha said. "He's busy." "Too busy for rats," George said. "That's just sad." I decided it was better not to get into it with George. Hermes," I said. "We need to talk to Zeus. It's important." Hermes's eyes were steely cold. "I am his messenger. May I take a message?" Behind me, the other demigods shifted restlessly. This wasn't going as planned. Maybe if I tried to speak with Hermes in private. "You guys," I said. "Why don't you do a sweep of the city? Check the defenses. See who's left in Olympus. Meet me back here in 30 minutes. Selena frowned. "But, that's a good idea," Annabeth said. "Connor and Travis, you two lead." The stalls seemed to like that, getting handed an important responsibility right in front of their dad. They usually never led anything except toilet paper raids. We're on it, Travis said. They herded the others out of the throne room, leaving me with Hermes. Kronos is going to attack New York. You must suspect that. Athena must have foreseen it. Athena, Hermes grumbled. He scratched his back with his caduceus, and George and Martha muttered ow, ow, ow. Don't get me started on her, she's the reason I'm here at all. Zeus didn't want any of us to leave the front line. But she kept pestering him non-stop. It's a trap, it's a diversion, blah, blah, blah. She wanted to come back herself, but Zeus was not going to let his #1 strategist leave his side while we're battling Typhon. And so naturally he sent me to talk to you. It is a trap. Is Zeus blind? Thunder rolled through the sky. I'd watch the comments. Boy, Hermes warned. Zeus is not blind or deaf. He has not left Olympus completely undefended. Like the blue lights, some mischief by that insufferable goddess of magic, Hecate, I'd wager, but you may have noticed they aren't doing any damage. Olympus has strong magical wards. Besides, Aeolus, the king of the winds, has sent his most powerful minions to guard the citadel. No one save the gods can approach Olympus from the air. They would be knocked out of the sky. What about that teleporting thing you guys do? That's a form of air travel too, Jackson. Very fast, but the wind gods are faster. No, if Kronos wants Olympus, he'll have to march through the entire city with his army and take the elevators. Can you see him doing this? I still didn't like it. Then get me to Typhon. I've dealt with monsters like him before. I can help, I said. Hermes shook his head impatiently. Percy Jackson, you don't understand. Typhon is our greatest enemy. I thought that was Kronos. I said, trying to mess with him. The god's eyes glowed. No, Percy. In the old days, Olympus was almost overthrown by Typhon. He is husband of Echidna. Not nice. And the father of all monsters. We can never forget how close he came to destroying us all, how he humiliated us. We were more powerful back in the old days. Now we can expect no help from Poseidon because he's fighting his own war. Hades sits in his realm and does nothing, and Demeter and Persephone follow his lead. I fought Isobu, the tree-tailed demon turtle. Alone and won, I said. Plus I have agents working to help out. What harm would there be taking me to Typhon? Quote. You are needed here, he countered. Shino Tsukiyomi. I made an illusion of me and Hermes looked surprised. Trust me, my power is far greater than you think. Very well. Give a message to Annabeth Percy too. Her mother said to warn you that you are on your own. You must hold Manhattan without the help of the gods. As if I didn't know that. Why they pay her to be the wisdom goddess, I'm not sure. Anything else? I asked. She said you should try Plan 23. She said you would know what that meant. Annabeth's face paled. Obviously she knew what it meant, and she didn't like it. Go on. Last thing. Hermes looked at the real me. She said to tell Percy. Something about staying away from her daughter. Thank you, Hermes, Percy too said. Hermes lowered the cattle prod, and it turned back to a staff. Percy Jackson, he said, because you have taken on the curse of Susano, I must warn you. You are in the hands of the fates now. We will leave now, he said tightly. We have a war to fight. He held onto the real me and began to shine. Percy too turned away. Good luck, Percy too. Martha the snake whispered. Hermes glowed with the light of a supernova. Then he was gone. Annabeth fell on the foot of her mother's throne and cried. I wanted to comfort her, but I didn't. Annabeth, I said, I trust you heard that. Annabeth wiped her eyes. She stared at the hearth like it was her own funeral pyre. She didn't answer. Her celestial bronze knife was strapped to her arm. Percy, she said, what are you? I shrugged. A man. Annabeth frowned. That doesn't make sense. Her eyes widened. Hermes said you bear the curse of Susano. Hestia said the same thing. What is it? Don't worry, you'll find out soon enough. Now don't tell the others. I grumbled. Annabeth was still studying my face, like she was trying to see differences of the clone. I guess you're right. My mom mentioned Plan 23. She rummaged in her pack and pulled out Daedalus's laptop. The blue Delta symbol glowed on the top when she booted it up. She opened a few files and started to read. Here it is, she said. Gods, we have a lot of work to do. One of Daedalus's inventions. A lot of inventions, dangerous ones. If my mother wants me to use this plan, she must think things are very bad. She looked at me. I shook my head not caring. Just then the Jason ran into the throne room. You need to see this, Jason said. Now, the blue lights in the sky had stopped, so at first I didn't understand what the problem was. The other campers had gathered in a small park at the edge of the mountain. They were clustered at the guardrail, looking down at Manhattan. The railing was lined with those tourist binoculars, where you could deposit 1 golden drachma and see the city. Campers were using every single one. I looked down at the city. I could see almost everything from here, the East River and the Hudson River carving the shape of Manhattan, the grid of streets, the lights of skyscrapers, the dark stretch of Central Park in the north. Everything looked normal, but something was wrong. I felt it in my bones before I realized what it was. I don't hear anything, Annabeth said. Even from this height, you should have heard the noise of the city, millions of people bustling around, thousands of cars and machines, the hum of a huge metropolis. You don't think about it when you live in New York, but it's always there. Even in the dead of night, New York is never silent. But it was now. What did they do? My voice sounded tight and angry. What did they do to my city? I pushed Michael Yu away from the binoculars and took a look. In the streets below, traffic had stopped. Pedestrians were lying on the sidewalks, or curled up in doorways. There was no sign of violence, no wrecks, nothing like that. It was as if all the people in New York had simply decided to stop whatever they were doing and pass out. Are they dead? Selena asked. Not dead, I said. Morpheus has put the entire island of Manhattan to sleep. Let the fun begin. Why? Annabeth asked, surprised by this. I turned to her, emotion lost to me. The invasion has begun. Quote, okay. I hope you like this and I will try to update my other stories soon. Please review. Jutsu. Shino Tsukiyomi, Mind Control, Tsukiyomi, and Clone. 5 Bomb Seal Release. Illusions. Shinigami Mask. Arbiter Facts. Greetings my loyal readers. Today we shall talk about the Shino Tsukiyomi. It is a Mangekyo Sharingan. That is the strongest of all illusions powers. The power of said eyes allow the user greater power than most. Such as plus mind control. The ability at which Percy captures the mind of the victim. While using his right eye appears to mark of his Mangekyo. The same sign appears on the victim, but then disappears, and the eyes are controlled by empty. Plus multiplication. Percy can create 6 copies of himself with the same amount of power. The damage inflicted at one of them is reduced to 1/6, only attacking all of them at the same time inflict normal damage. Plus replication. With his power, Percy can make copies of Justu, fight style, and basically anything of his opponent's even unique weapon. When this power is in work, weapon methods are not inferior to the original. Now those are the main ones, but there are others such as the plus Susanoo, a miniature black armor that is as strong as a regular Susanoo. Plus Tsukiyomi, a regular version of the Tsukiyomi Jutsu where he can control time and space at will for days. Now while the effects of say mind control and replication may seem to wear off, the illusions can remain for long after Percy dies. And the targets are never free from the power. Percy can still control people whenever. Just like Aizen from Bleach. You call my name. Crud. Percy, please help. What's up? So you're the kid with power similar to Kyoka Suigetsu. Now let's see what is stronger. Sure. Shatter Kyoka Suigetsu. Shino Tsukiyomi. Well then that's it for now. I shall see you later if I don't die in this fight. Mrs. O'Leary was the only one happy about the sleeping city. She was found pigging out at an overturned hot dog stand while the owner was curled up on the sidewalk, sucking his thumb. Argus was waiting for us with his 100 eyes wide open. His face made it clear he was freaking out. I told him what we'd learned in Olympus, and how the gods would not be riding to the rescue for a while. Argus rolled his eyes in disgust, which looked pretty psychedelic since it made his whole body swirl. You'd better get back to camp, I told him. Guard it as best you can. He pointed at me and raised his eyebrow quizzically. I'm staying. A shinobi never abandons his mission, I said. Argus nodded, like this answer satisfied him. He looked at Annabeth and drew a circle in the air with his finger. Yes, Annabeth agreed. I think it's time. Argus rummaged around in the back of his van. He brought out a bronze shield and passed it to Annabeth. It looked pretty much standard issue, the same kind of round shield we always used in Capture the Flag. But when Annabeth set it on the ground, the reflection on the polished metal changed from sky and buildings to the Statue of Liberty, which wasn't anywhere close to us. "Whoa," I said. "What is that?" "One of Daedalus's ideas, a video shield," Annabeth said. "I had Beckendorf make this before." She glanced at Selena. Anyway, the shield bends sunlight or moonlight from anywhere in the world to create a reflection. You can literally see any target under the sun or moon, as long as natural light is touching it. Look. We crowded around as Annabeth concentrated. The image zoomed and spun at first, so I got motion sickness just watching it. We were in the Central Park Zoo, then zooming down East 60th, past Bloomingdale's, then turning on 3rd Avenue. "Whoa," Connor Stoll said. "Back up. Zoom in right there." "What?" Annabeth said nervously. "You see invaders." "No. Right there, Dylan's candy bar." Connor grinned at his brother. "Dude, it's open. And everyone is asleep. Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" "Connor," Katie Gardner scolded. She sounded like her mother, Demeter. "This is serious. You are not going to loot a candy store in the middle of a war." "Sorry," Connor muttered, but he didn't sound very ashamed. Annabeth passed her hand in front of the shield, and another scene popped up. FDR Drive, looking across the river at Lighthouse Park. "This will let us see what's going on across the city," she said. "Thank you, Argus. Hopefully we'll see you back at camp, someday." Argus grunted. He gave me a look that clearly meant good luck, "You'll need it," then climbed into his van. He and the two Harpy drivers swerved away, weaving around clusters of idle cars that littered the road. Nico whistled for Mrs. O'Leary, and she came bounding over. "Easy girl," he said. "You remember Grover, the satyr we met in the park?" "Woof. I hoped that meant sure I do. And not, do you have more hot dogs?" "I need you to find him," he said. "Make sure he's still awake. We're going to need his help." "You got that. Find Grover." Mrs. O'Leary gave him a sloppy wet kiss, which seemed kind of unnecessary. Then she raced off, crouched next to a sleeping policeman. "I don't get it. Why didn't we fall asleep too? Why just the mortals?" "This is a huge spell," Selena Beauregard said. "The bigger the spell, the easier it is to resist. If you want to sleep millions of mortals, you've got to cast a very thin layer of magic. Sleeping demigods is much harder." I stared at her. "When did you learn so much about magic?" Selena blushed. "I don't spend all my time on my wardrobe." "Percy," Annabeth called. She was still looking at the shield. "You'd better see this." The bronze image showed Long Island Sound near LaGuardia. A fleet of a dozen speedboats raced through the dark water toward Manhattan. Each boat was packed with demigods in full Greek armor. At the back of the lead boat, a purple banner emblazoned with a black scythe flapped in the night wind. I'd never seen that design before, but it wasn't hard to figure out. The battle flag of Kronos. "Scan the perimeter of the island," I said. Annabeth shifted the scene south to the harbor. A Staten Island ferry was plowing through the waves near Ellis Island. The deck was crowded with Dracinae and a whole pack of hellhounds. Swimming in front of the ship was a pod of marine mammals. At first I thought they were dolphins. Then I saw their dog-like faces and the swords strapped to their waists, and I realized they were telkines, sea demons. The scene shifted again. The Jersey Shore, right at the entrance to the Lincoln Tunnel. 100 assorted monsters were marching past the lanes of stopped traffic. Giants with clubs, rogue cyclops, a few fire-spitting dragons, and, just to rub it in, a World War II-era Sherman tank, pushing cars out of its way as it rumbled into the tunnel. "As the whole state asleep?" I asked. Annabeth frowned. "I don't think so, but it's strange. As far as I can tell from these pictures, Manhattan is totally asleep. Then there's like a 50-mile radius around the island where time is running really, really slow. The closer you get to Manhattan, the slower it is." She showed me another scene, a New Jersey highway. It was Saturday evening, so the traffic wasn't as bad as it might have been on a weekday. The drivers looked awake, but the cars were moving at about 1 mile per hour. Birds flew overhead in slow motion. "Kronos," I said, staring at the images. "He's slowing time." "Hecate might be helping," Katie Gardner said. Look how the cars are all veering away from the Manhattan exits, like they're getting a subconscious message to turn back. I don't know. Annabeth sounded really frustrated, but somehow they've surrounded Manhattan in layers of magic. The outside world might not even realize something is wrong. Any mortals coming toward Manhattan will slow down so much they won't know what's happening. Like flies in amber, Jason said. Annabeth nodded. We shouldn't expect any help coming in. I turned to my friends. They looked stunned and scared, and I couldn't blame them. The shield had shown us at least 300 enemies on the way. There were 40 of us. And we had 2 Jonin-level shinobi, a former Captain Class Anbu Black Op, and a handful of demigods. We're going to hold Manhattan, I said. Selena tugged at her armor. Percy, Manhattan is huge. I thought you'd learn by now that with me anything is possible. I said. He's right, Annabeth said. The gods of the wind should keep Kronos' forces away from Olympus by air, so he'll try a ground assault. We have to cut off the entrances to the island. They have boats, Jason pointed out. An electric tingle went down my back. Suddenly I understood the advice I was given: remember the rivers. We'll take care of the boats, I said. Annabeth frowned. How? Shadow clone jutsu, I said, summoning a squad of shadow clones. Just leave it to me, I said. We need to guard the bridges and tunnels. Let's assume they'll try a midtown or downtown assault, at least on their first try. That would be the most direct way to the Empire State Building. Michael, take Apollo's cabin to the Williamsburg Bridge. Katie, Demeter's cabin takes the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. Grow thorn bushes and poison ivy in the tunnel. Do whatever you have to do, but keep them out of there. Connor, take half of Hermes' cabin and cover the Manhattan Bridge. Travis, you take the other half and cover the Brooklyn Bridge. And no stopping for looting or pillaging. The whole Hermes cabin complained. Selena, take the Aphrodite crew to the Queen's Midtown Tunnel. I continued. Oh my gods, one of her sisters said. Fifth Avenue is so on our way. We could accessorize, and monsters, like, totally hate the smell of Givenchy. No delays, I said. Well, the perfume thing, if you think it'll work. 6 Aphrodite girls kissed me on the cheek in excitement. All right, enough. I closed my eyes, trying to think of what I'd forgotten. The Holland Tunnel. Jake, take the Hephaestus cabin there. Use Greek fire, set traps. Whatever you've got, he grinned. Gladly. We've got a score to settle. For Beckendorf. The whole cabin roared in approval. The 59th Street Bridge, I said. We'll take that. Annabeth stepped in. She turned to her siblings. Malcolm, take the Athena cabin, activate Plan 23 along the way, just like I showed you. Hold that position. You got it, he said. Annabeth, go with your siblings. Nico, Jason, and I will go at them head on, she said. Hi, the 2 boys said in union. All right, I said. Keep in touch with cell phones. We don't have cell phones, Selena protested. I grew a tick mark on my head and reached down, picked up some snoring lady's BlackBerry, and tossed it to Selena. You do now. You all know Annabeth's number, right? If you need us, pick up a random phone and call us. Use it once, drop it, then borrow another one if you have to. That should make it harder for the monsters to zero in on you. Everyone grinned as though they liked this idea. Travis cleared his throat. If we find a really nice phone. Drop it or I'll drop you off a building. I said. Man. Hold it, Percy, Jake Mason said. You forgot the Lincoln Tunnel. I was getting annoyed by this group. Then a girl's voice called from across the street. How about you leave that to us? I turned and saw a band of 30 adolescent girls crossed Fifth Avenue. They wore white shirts, silvery camouflage pants, and combat boots. They all had swords at their sides, quivers on their backs, and bows at the ready. A pack of white timber wolves milled around their feet, and many of the girls had hunting falcons on their arms. The girl in the lead had spiky black hair and a black leather jacket. She wore a silver circlet on her head like a princess's tiara, which didn't match her skull earrings or her Death to Barbie t-shirt showing a little Barbie doll with an arrow through its head. Talia, Annabeth cried. The daughter of Zeus grinned. The hunters of Artemis, reporting for duty. There were hugs and greetings all around, or at least Talia was friendly. The other hunters didn't like being around campers, especially boys, but they didn't shoot any of us, which for them was a pretty warm welcome. Where have you been the last year? Nico asked Talia. You've got like twice as many hunters now. She laughed. Long story. I bet my adventures were more dangerous than yours, D'Angelo. How's the new guy? They turned to me as I fixed the color of my Anbu shirt. I then put on my wolf Anbu mask and turned to my clones. You're wasting time. Get to it, I said. Yes sir, they said, disappearing. Talia, meet Percy Jackson, the son of Poseidon. Looks like I got a new cousin. She smiled. Are you going to stand around all day, or do I have to do everything because you're incapable of killing a single monster? I said without emotion. Oh yeah, those monsters won't know what hit them. Hunters, move out, she said, getting mad. She slapped her silver bracelet, and the shield Aegis spiraled into full form. The golden head of Medusa molded in the center was so horrible, the campers all backed away. The hunters took off down the avenue, followed by their wolves and falcons, and I had a feeling the Lincoln Tunnel would be safe for now. Thank the gods, Annabeth said. That was kinda cold. I looked at her through my mask and she looked slightly scared. Don't care. I looked at the campers, all of them grim and determined. Demigods, I told them. My brothers, sisters of the sword. I'd rather fight with you than any army in both worlds. Let no man, woman, monster, god or titan forget how menacing we are. We are heroes. Hoo, they said as warriors would. Do you know what's out there? Waiting beyond those waters. Immortality. Take it. It's yours. Now go forth and prove that we are the ones to fear. I raised Riptide and shouted, for Olympus. They shouted in response, and our 40 voices echoed off the buildings of Midtown. For a moment it sounded brave, but it died quickly in the silence of 10 million sleeping New Yorkers. I had my clones convince the sea gods in the area to help out, providing I gave them some sand dollars. Weird, I know. We were hopping around the city and after some time we got wind the Apollo cabin needs help. The monster leading the attack on them was the Minotaur. With the gods. What was I thinking? Taking on Typhon, the father of all monsters. The guy was huge and I had to cast the Shinosukeyomi on myself to keep me from going insane. To me he looked like a large shadowy figure composed of dark clouds. Wow, I said, looking up at the guy. Yeah, Hermes said, turning his weapon into a cannon again. So you have a plan? Yeah, we fight till the time is right. I said. Susano. Hermes nodded. Here, let me help, he said, looking at me serious. I, Hermes, god of thieves and messenger of the god, bless you with the power of flight till Typhon is defeated. My body glowed and I suddenly felt myself floating off the ground. Cool, I said, amazed by this. Arg! Typhon roared, being hit by attacks from the gods. He created storms of tremendous power, including tornadoes, storms and possibly hurricanes. Ah no, I said, seeing them. I hope this works. I said, not even sure if it would. Storm style. Demon Dragon Storm secret technique. I produce a massive thunder cloud capable of infinitely absorbing energy from the storms. It increased in size, strength and ferocity. Lightning struck me and I felt my power increased. Now storm style. Laser circus. This technique created several beams and shot them at the typhoon. First, a halo of bright energy spreads around my hands as this technique is activated. Then the technique encircles my hand and from that the beams are shot out towards the enemy. I was then able to alter the beam's direction after being shot, making it possible to strike multiple parts of his body with pinpoint accuracy. Fow, I said, amazed and surprised that had worked and not killed me. Typhoon looked at me and glared. You will die, he roared. Not a chance, Shinosukeyomi. I replied and then felt that same burning feeling like in the underworld. Susano. I leapt into the air and Typhoon punched me back onto the ground. Ouch. I cried, even thought I only felt a portion of that, it still hurt bad. You're not getting out of shape on me, son. I looked and saw my dad standing over me holding out his hand to help me up. I was wondering when you'd get here. I said, taking it. You were rather convincing. Hey, you two going to keep talking, or are you going to help? Hermes shouted. Dad, you and the other keep him distracted. I got a wild plan. I said, disappearing. I had several clones out in the world looking for some kind of way to stop this monster, and after a bit one clone returned with the answer. I recalled many of my shadow clones and had them scatter around getting into position. Once they were, I used the old jutsu my master taught us in case she ever lost control. Chakra chains. This technique molds my chakra into chains which, after materializing, can be used for various purposes such as physically restraining targets. My clone shot them out of their bodies and soon Typhoon was bound in chains. Impossible. He roared as the clones forced him down. No such thing. Impossible is just a word people use when they haven't found the solution to their problem, I said as the gods landed to the spot Typhoon's head was. Shino Tsukiyomi, I said and created a new illusion. The Blade of Olympus, a powerful weapon seen in the God of War games. It is a large sword with a bluish light in its blade. I had to say I love these eyes and this blade. You think you can kill me with that? Typhoon laughed. You don't play a lot of video games, I said and plunged the sword into his skull. Lightning coursed through the blade and a gold glow was coming from Typhoon's body. Gold particles were flying in the air and Percy removed the blade. I have searched hard for a key to ending this war and now I have. The time of the Titans is over. Typhoon exploded into gold energy and waded into nothing. Chains now laid out where they once helped the most power Titan. I undid the clones and returned the blade to the nothingness it once was. The gods looked at me weird. Some looked scared, some looked concerned and some looked ready to attack me. As I raced to the Williamsburg Bridge, I felt a knot formed in the pit of my stomach. I saw the battle before me. It was well after midnight now, but the bridge blazed with light. Cars were burning. Arcs of fire streamed in both directions as flaming arrows and spears sailed through the air. I then saw the Apollo campers retreating. They would hide behind cars and snipe at the approaching army, setting off explosive arrows and dropping caltrops in the road, building fiery barricades wherever they could, dragging sleeping drivers out of their cars to get them out of harms. The enemy kept advancing. An entire phalanx of Dracaena marched in the lead, their shields locked together, spear tips bristling over the top. An occasional arrow would connect with their snaky trunks, or a neck, or a chink in their armor, and the unlucky snake woman would disintegrate, but most of the Apollo arrows glanced harmlessly off their shield wall. About 100 more monsters marched behind them. Hellhounds leapt ahead of the line from time to time. Most were destroyed with arrows, but one got hold of an Apollo camper and dragged him away. I didn't see what happened to him next. I didn't want to know. Sure enough, in the middle of the invading legion was old Beefhead himself. From the waist down, he wore standard Greek battle gear, a kilt-like apron of leather and metal flaps, bronze greaves covering his legs, and tightly wrapped leather sandals. His top was all bull hair and hide and muscle leading to a head so large he should have toppled over just from the weight of his horns. He seemed larger than I read he was, 10 feet tall at least now. A double-bladed axe was strapped to his back, but he was too impatient to use it. We were at least 100 feet up, but the limo came sailing toward us, flipping fender over fender like a 2-ton boomerang. Annabeth and Porkpie swerved madly to the left, while Blackjack tucked in his wings and limo sailed over my head, missing by maybe 2 inches. It cleared the suspension lines of the bridge and fell toward the East River. Monsters jeered and shouted, and the Minotaur picked up another car. I landed down near my troops and Michael Yu ran up to was definitely the shortest commando I'd ever seen. He had a bandaged cut on his arm. His ferrety face was smeared with soot and his quiver was almost empty, but he was smiling like he was having a great time. Glad you could join us, he said. Where are the other reinforcements? For now, I'm it, and that's all you need, I said. Okay then, he said. You still have your flying chariot? Annabeth asked coming from behind. Nah, Michael said. Left it at camp. I told Clarice she could have it. Whatever, you know, not worth fighting about anymore. But she said it was too late. We'd insulted her honor for the last time or some stupid thing. Michael shrugged. Yeah, well, I called her some names when she said she still wouldn't fight. I doubt that helped. Here come the uglies. He drew an arrow and launched it toward the enemy. The arrow made a screaming sound as it flew. When it landed, it unleashed a blast like a power chord on an electric guitar magnified through the world's largest speakers. The nearest cars exploded. Monsters dropped their weapons and clasped their ears in pain. Some ran. Others disintegrated on the spot. That was my last sonic arrow, Michael said. A gift from your dad? I asked. God of music. Michael grinned wickedly. Loud music can be bad for you. Unfortunately, it doesn't always kill. Sure enough, most monsters were regrouping, shaking off their confusion. We have to fall back, Michael said. I've got Kayla and Austin setting traps farther down the bridge. No, I said. Bring your campers forward to this position and wait for my signal. We're going to drive the enemy back to Brooklyn. Michael laughed. How do you plan to do that? I drew my sword, Shino Tsukiyomi. I said, creating a new batch of arrows. These should help. They're made from my power, they will never run out. I said, giving them to Michael. Percy, Annabeth said, let me come with you. No, I said, I need you to help Michael coordinate the defensive line. I'll deal with the monsters. You group up here, move the sleeping mortals out of the way. Then you can start picking off monsters while I keep them focused on me. If anybody can do all that, you can. Michael snorted. Thanks a lot. I gave my Annabeth my famous wolf stare. She nodded, knowing not to argue. All right, get moving. I stepped out from behind the school bus. I walked up the bridge in plain sight, straight toward the enemy. When the Minotaur saw me, his eyes burned with hate. He bellowed, a sound that was somewhere between a yell, a moo, and a really loud belch. Hey, looking for me? I shouted. He pounded his fist into the hood of Alexis, and it crumpled like aluminum foil. A few Dracine threw flaming javelins at me. I knocked them aside, a hellhound lunged, and I sidestepped. Then I brought Riptide up in a deadly arc. The hellhound disintegrated into dust and fur. More monsters surged forward, snakes and giants and telkines, but the Minotaur roared at them, and they backed off. 1-on-1, I called. Where do you people get this courage to face me like this? The Minotaur's nostrils quivered. He seriously needed to keep a pack of aloe vera Kleenex in his armor pocket, because that nose was wet and red and pretty gross. He unstrapped his axe and swung it around. It was beautiful in a harsh "I'm going to gut you like a fish" kind of way. Each of its twin blades was shaped like an omega, omega the last letter of the Greek alphabet. Maybe that was because the axe would be the last thing his victims ever saw. The shaft was about the same height as the Minotaur, bronze wrapped in leather. Tied around the base of each blade were lots of bead necklaces. I realized they were Camp Half-Blood beads, necklaces taken from defeated demigods. In truth, I felt nothing for those who died by that weapon. I was raised and taught not to feel when in battle. The monster army cheered for the Minotaur, but the sound died when I dodged his first swing and sliced his axe in half, right between the handholds. Moo, he grunted. Ha! I spun and kicked him in the snout. Roadhouse. He staggered backward, trying to regain his footing, then lowered his head to charge. He never got the chance. My sword flashed, slicing off one horn, then the other. He tried to grab me. Jumped over him, picked up half of his broken axe. The other monsters backed up in stunned silence, making a circle around us. The Minotaur bellowed in rage. He was never very smart, and now his anger made him reckless. He charged me, and I threw the axe bit into his face. I jumped up, grabbed the axe and pulled. It ripped the monster's head off, and as I dropped the weapon down with the Minotaur's head still on it, the body turned to dust. I turned toward his army. It was now roughly 199 to 1. I did the natural thing. I readied a jutsu. In my right hand I formed a Rasengan, and using my other hand I held it over the ball and gathered water, mixing it with the jutsu. Stand back, I roared. Water style. Rasen tsunami. I threw the ball and water consumed the enemy and twisted around in all direction. Before long, bits of gold, weapons and bodies could be seen in the water. When it cleared up, there was about 20 people left. Yes, yelled Michael, that's what I'm talking about. We drove them back toward the Brooklyn side of the bridge. The sky was growing pale in the east. I could see the toll stations ahead. Percy, Annabeth yelled. You've already routed them. Pull back. We're overextended. Then I saw the crowd at the base of the bridge. The retreating monsters were running straight toward their reinforcements. It was a small group, maybe 30 or 40 demigods in battle armor, mounted on skeletal horses. One of them held a purple banner with the black scythe design. The lead horseman trotted forward. He took off his helm, and from the records this was Kronos himself, his eyes like molten gold. Annabeth and the Apollo campers faltered. The monsters we'd been pursuing reached the Titan's line and were absorbed into the new force. Kronos gazed in our direction. He was a quarter-mile away, but I could see him smile. "Now," I said, "you pull back." The Titan Lord's men drew their swords and charged. The hooves of their skeletal horses thundered against the pavement. Our archers shot a volley, bringing down several of the enemy, but they just kept riding. "Retreat," I told my friends. "I'll hold them." In a matter of seconds they were on me. Michael and his archers tried to retreat, but Annabeth stayed right beside me, fighting with her knife and mirrored shield as we slowly backed up the bridge. Kronos' cavalry swirled around us, slashing and yelling insults. The Titan himself advanced leisurely, like he had all the time in the world. Being the Lord of Time, I guess he did. Shino Tsukiyomi. Using my illusions, I created a new weapon. It consisted of a pair of chains, each ending in 3 claw-like daggers that give off a teal-colored aura. "Duck," I ordered and started swinging the weapon around by the chain. All around me the enemies were cut, many died while others were electrocuted. A dark shape passed over me, and I dared to glance up. Blackjack and Porkpie were swooping in, kicking our enemies in the helmets and flying away like very large kamikaze pigeons. Behind me, Annabeth cried out in pain. I looked in time to see her fall, clutching her arm. A demigod with a bloody knife stood over her. In a flash I understood what had happened. He'd been trying to stab me. Annabeth had intercepted the knife with her own body. "Time to go," I said, throwing Annabeth into the air and landed on Blackjack. "Get her out of here," I ordered. He did, and I stood alone. Knee locked eyes with the enemy demigod. He wore an eye patch under his war helm. Ethan Nakamura, the son of Nemesis. I would have felt remorse for the guy had he not been my enemy. I slammed him in the face with fists so hard I dented his helm. "Interesting," Kronos said. He towered above me on his skeletal horse, his scythe in one hand. He studied the scene with narrowed eyes as if he could sense that I'd just come close to death, the way a wolf can smell fear. "Bravely fought, Percy Jackson," he said. "But it's time to surrender, or they die." He dismounted, his scythe glistening in the dawn light. "I like to see you try," I said as electricity sparked from my weapon. "You may have an unusual power, demigod, but you are no match for me." Funny Typhoon said the same before I killed him. I smirked and threw the blades in front of me and held it in front of me like a blender. Kronos' smile wavered as the blades cut his armor off and electricity was coursed through him. I retracted the blades and charged them with power. Kronos struck the bridge with the butt of his scythe, and a wave of pure force blasted me backward. Cars went careening. Demigods, even Luke's own men, were blown off the edge of the bridge. Suspension cords whipped around, and I skidded halfway back to Manhattan. I got unsteadily to my feet. The remaining Apollo campers had almost made it to the end of the bridge, except for Michael Yu, who was perched on one of the suspension cables a few yards away from me. His arrow was notched in his bow. "Michael, go," I screamed. "Percy, the bridge," he called. "It's already weak." I looked down and saw fissures in the pavement. Patches of the road were half melted from Greek fire. The bridge had taken a beating from Kronos' blast and the exploding arrows. "Break it," Michael yelled. "Use your powers." It was a desperate thought, but I stood for a minute concentrating. The bridge shook and began to crumble. Chunks the size of houses fell into the East River. Kronos' demigods cried out in alarm and scrambled backward. Some were knocked off their feet. Within a few seconds, a 50-foot chasm opened in the Williamsburg Bridge between Kronos and me. The vibrations died. Kronos' men crept to the edge and looked at the 130-foot drop into the river. The suspension cables were still attached. The men could get across that way if they were brave enough. The Titan Lord studied the problem. He looked behind him at the rising sun, then smiled across the chasm. He raised his scythe in a mock salute. "Until this evening, Jackson." He mounted his horse, whirled around, and galloped back to Brooklyn, followed by his warriors. I turned to thank Michael Yu, but the words died in my throat. 20 feet away, a bow lay in the street. Its owner was nowhere to be seen. I bowed my head as he wasn't seen anywhere. I was about to move on when a phone rang. When I looked down, I saw Annabeth's phone on the ground. The LCD display said I had a call from Finkelstein and Associates, probably a demigod calling on a borrowed phone. I picked up, hoping for a little good news. Of course I was wrong. "Percy," Selena Beauregard sounded like she'd been crying. Plaza Hotel. You'd better come quickly and bring a healer from Apollo's cabin. It's Annabeth. Oh great, I responded, rolling me eye. After splitting up, Jason was roaming around the city. He flew around buildings and kept his eyes peeled for enemies that the other couldn't fight. Ever since Percy unlocked his chakra and taught him the art of ninjutsu, he felt stronger than ever. That was when he saw the Athena kids in trouble. He landed and saw the Titans' Krios. Krios was wearing a set of ram's horns along with armor with stars on it. He told the Athena kids to back up and let him fight the Titan. The son of Zeus wishes to fight me. Krios asked. I'm the son of Jupiter. I'm a child of Rome, consul to demigods, praetor of the First Legion. I slew the Trojan sea monster. And now I'm going to destroy you, Jason roared, gathering energy. He wrapped his body in a layer of lightning chakra that, instead of being used offensively, was used to electrically stimulate his nervous system. The technique has the power to speed up neural synapses to react faster, and to push physical prowess to the absolute limit, allowing for tremendous raw speed. This was the lightning release armor that I taught him after learning of his lightning power. Now let's fight, Jason said, popping his neck before moving faster than ever. With major speed he punched Krios. He was forced back and pinned to a wall with only a shield to block the electric fist. Jason pushed with more force, breaking the shield. He then heard something behind him. He turned and saw arrows flying towards him. They of course were vaporized before they could even get close to him. Jason removed his fist and moved in a blur so fast that he disappeared and appeared a little distant from Krios. Jason raised his clenched fist in the air and gathered chakra. A large bolt of lightning then descended upon the group of 20 archers from the air, completely vaporizing them with a strong blast of lightning. Jason turned and saw more monsters coming at him. Jason raised one of his hands, with the thumb and index finger outstretched, but bent forward in the target's direction in a claw-like manner, and all the other fingers bent forward in the target's direction in a claw-like manner, and all the other fingers bent, creating a large, blinding flash using the electricity within their body, which can act as a distraction, thus leaving his victims in a momentary blindness. In a blue blur, Jason zipped past everyone and delivered fatal blows to his enemies, leaving only Jason and Krios. What are you? Krios asked. I am a Roman shinobi, Jason said, waving hand signs, and grabbed his wrist. Chidori, Jason said, gathering lightning chakra into his hand. The amount of chakra was so great that it becomes visible. The high concentration of electricity produces a sound reminiscent of many birds chirping, hence the name. Utilizing his speed, Jason moved in a flash and stabbed Krios in the gut, piercing his armor and his gut. Arg! Krios cried, spitting out blood. Jason lifted his hand and slammed him onto the ground. Jason removed his hand and then kicked Krios a fair distance. Krios got up and charged cosmic energy into his hands and then fired it in him. Jason, charged with electricity, created a powerful lightning barrier that protected him. Krios was in bad shape as he was losing blood, and Jason's hand not a single scratch on him. The lightning armor was still holding. Arg! Okay, I surrender, he said weakly. Jason had a blank face and gathered a large quantity of lightning in his fist and then punched the ground, engulfing Krios a torrent of lightning and destroying much of the surrounding ground in the process. And with that, Krios was gone. Why would I let you live? You would never let us, Jason said, looking at his palm. I would never have imagined that my power could be this great. I had always thought I was at my strongest. But, Jason thought as the image of Percy looking down on him flashed in his mind. That was before he came. I will have to remember to thank Percy-sensei. I grabbed Will Solace from the Apollo cabin and told the rest of his siblings to keep searching for Michael Yu. We borrowed a Yamaha FZI from a sleeping biker and drove to the Plaza Hotel at speeds that would have given my mom a heart attack. I'd never driven a motorcycle before, but it wasn't any harder than riding a horse. Along the way, I noticed a lot of empty pedestals that usually held statues. Plan 23 seemed to be working. I didn't know or care if that was good or bad. It only took us 5 minutes to reach the plaza, an old-fashioned white stone hotel with a gabled blue roof, sitting at the southeast corner of Central Park. Tactically speaking, the plaza wasn't the best place for a headquarters. It wasn't the tallest building in town, or the most centrally located. But it had old school style and had attracted a lot of famous demigods over the years, like the Beatles and Alfred Hitchcock, so they figured we were in good company. I gunned the Yamaha over the curb and swerved to a stop at the fountain outside the hotel. Will and I hopped off. The statue at the top of the fountain called down. "Oh, fine. I suppose you want me to watch your bike too." She was a life-size bronze standing in the middle of a granite bowl. She wore only a bronze sheet around her legs, and she was holding a basket of metal fruit. "I would ask if you are supposed to be Demeter," I asked, "but given facts, I would have to ask if you are Pompona, the Roman goddess of plenty." She nodded her head. "Practically everyone thinks I'm Demeter," she complained. "I am indeed Pompona, but why do you care? Nobody cares about the minor gods. If more cared about the minor gods, you wouldn't be losing this war." 3 cheers for Morpheus and Hecate, I say. "Watch the bike. Oh, and by the way, we aren't losing because by my count, the Titans are down Typhoon and Krios. Not to mention more than half their army is dead." I told her. Food for thought. Will and I walked toward the hotel. I'd never actually been inside the plaza. The lobby was impressive, with the crystal chandeliers and the passed-out rich people, but I didn't pay much attention. A couple of hunters gave us directions to the elevators, and we rode up to the penthouse suites. Demigods had completely taken over the top floors. Campers and hunters were crashed out on sofas, washing up in the bathrooms, ripping silk draperies to bandage their wounds, and helping themselves to snacks and sodas from the minibars. A couple of timber wolves were drinking out of the toilets till I passed by and they bowed their heads. They knew I was the alpha of all wolves. I was somewhat relieved to see that so many of my comrades had made it through the night alive, but everybody looked beat up. "Percy." Jake Mason clapped me on the shoulder. "We're getting reports." "Later," I said. "Where's Mrs. Payne in the butt?" "Annabeth. The terrace. She's alive, man, but..." I pushed past him. Under different circumstances I would have loved the view from the terrace. It looked straight down onto Central Park. The morning was clear and bright, perfect for a picnic or a hike, or pretty much anything except fighting monsters. Annabeth lay on a lounge chair. Her face was pale and beaded with sweat. Even though she was covered in blankets, she shivered. Selena Beauregard was wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. Will and I pushed through a crowd of Athena kids. Will unwrapped Annabeth's bandages to examine the wound. The bleeding had stopped, but the gash looked deep. The skin around the cut was a horrible shade of green. "Annabeth, that was stupid to take that knife for me. I am but a clone. A illusion of the true Percy. That attack would not hurt me," I stated like a sensei scolding his student. Will Solace exhaled with relief. "It's not so bad, Annabeth. A few more minutes and we would have been in trouble, but the venom hasn't gotten past the shoulder yet. Just lie still. Somebody hand me some nectar." I grabbed a canteen. Will cleaned out the wound with the godly drink while Annabeth held onto my hand. "Ow," she said. "Ow, ow." She gripped my fingers so tight they turned purple, but she stayed still, like Will asked. Selena muttered words of encouragement. Will put some silver paste over the wound and hummed words in ancient Greek, a hymn to Apollo. Then he applied fresh bandages and stood up shakily. The healing must have taken a lot of his energy. He looked almost as pale as Annabeth. "That should do it," he said. "But we're going to need some mortal supplies." He grabbed a piece of hotel stationery, jotted down some notes, and handed it to one of the Athena guys. "There's a Dwayne Reed on 5th. Normally I would not steal." "I would," Travis volunteered. Will glared at him. "Leave cash or drachmas to pay, whatever you've got, but this is an emergency. I've got a feeling we're going to have a lot more people to treat." Nobody disagreed. There was hardly a single demigod who hadn't already been wounded, except me. "Come on, guys," Travis Stoll said. "Let's give Annabeth some space. We've got a drugstore to raid. I mean, visit." The demigods shuffled back inside. Jake Mason grabbed my shoulder as he was leaving. "We'll talk later, but it's under control. I'm using Annabeth's shield to keep an eye on things." The enemy withdrew at sunrise, not sure why. "We've got a lookout at each bridge and tunnel." "You mistake me for someone who cares," I said. He paled. "Oh, okay." He closed the terrace doors behind him, leaving Selena, Annabeth, and me alone. Selena pressed a cool cloth to Annabeth's forehead. "This is all my fault." "No, Annabeth said weakly. Selena, how is it your fault? I've never been any good at camp, she murmured. Not like you or Percy. If I was a better fighter. Her mouth trembled. Tsukiyomi, I said, getting up, and trapped her and got up my jutsu. I walked over to her and placed a seal on her shoulder. She stared at me in horror. Yes, I know. No, instead of feeling sorry, how about you do something to help out? Of course. We need the Ares cabin. I can talk to Clarice. I know I can convince her to help us. Very well, Selena, even if you can get off the island. Selena threw her arms around me. Then she pushed back awkwardly. Sorry. Thank you, Percy-sama. I won't let you down. Once she was gone, I stood next to Annabeth and felt her forehead. She was still burning up. Sir, I have the item you requested. A clone said, appearing. He was holding the golden fleece. I was also sure to leave a replica behind. Good, I told him as he handed it to me. Then the golden fleece changed into a golden armlet of sort. The fleece was constituted of 3 main parts. The upper shoulder section, at the side of my head, the biceps section, and the lower arm section. The design seen in the 2 lower parts resembled to horn images, representing the animal which the fleece came from, the ram. I slipped it onto my right arm and felt better than I had in ages. I placed Annabeth's hand on the lower part of the fleece so she could get some more healing. One could call you cute when you're worried, she muttered. Do not mistake my act of kindness as worry or friendship. I said, you insulted my wife, and took action when not told to. If we were in my village, you would be demoted to academy student. What made you like this? I know you can be a different person. When you live in a world full of hate and pain. When you have no one and then gain a family. Then lose that family after being taught to forget emotions. Life will do that to you. In a world like that, what am I supposed to be? I don't know. Annabeth. Never worry about me. I lived so long, I just can't die. I told her. We watched the sun come up over the city. The traffic should have been heavy by now, but there were no cars honking, no crowds bustling along the sidewalks. Far away, I could hear a car alarm echo through the streets. A plume of black smoke curled into the sky somewhere over Harlem. I wondered how many ovens had been left on when the Morpheus spell hit, how many people had fallen asleep in the middle of cooking dinner. Pretty soon there would be more fires. Everyone in New York was in danger, and all those lives depended on me. Try to get some rest. The terrace door opened. Connor Stoll stepped through. Percy. He glanced at Annabeth like he didn't want to say anything bad in front of her, but I could tell he wasn't bringing good news. Mrs. O'Leary just came back with Grover. I think you should talk to him. Grover was having a snack in the living room. He was dressed for battle in an armored shirt made from tree bark and twist ties, with his wooden cudgel and his reed pipes hanging from his belt. The Demeter cabin had whipped up a whole buffet in the hotel kitchens, everything from pizza to pineapple ice cream. Unfortunately, Grover was eating the furniture. He'd already chewed the stuffing off a fancy chair and was now gnawing the armrest. Dude, Nico said coming into view, we're only borrowing this place. Blah ha ha, he had stuffing all over his face. Sorry, it's just Louis XVI furniture. Delicious. Plus I always eat furniture when I get. When you get nervous, Jason said entering the room. Jason didn't have a scratch. Yeah, we know, so what's up? He clocked on his hooves. I heard about Annabeth. Is she? She's going to be fine. She's resting, I said, adjusting the fleece armor. Grover took a deep breath. That's good. I've mobilized most of the nature spirits in the city. Well, the ones that will listen to me, anyway. He rubbed his forehead. I had no idea acorns could hurt so much. Anyway, we're helping out as much as we can. He told me about the skirmishes they'd seen. Mostly they'd been covering uptown, where we didn't have enough demigods. Hellhounds had appeared in all sorts of places, shadow traveling inside our lines, and the dryads and satyrs had been fighting them off. A young dragon had appeared in Harlem, and a dozen wood nymphs died before the monster was finally defeated. As Grover talked, Talia entered the room with 2 of her lieutenants. She nodded to me grimly, went outside to check on Annabeth, and came back in. She listened while Grover completed his report, the details getting worse and worse. We lost 20 satyrs against some giants at Fort Washington, he said, his voice trembling. Almost half my kinsmen. River spirits drowned the giants in the end, but Talia shouldered her bow. Percy, Kronos' forces are still gathering at every bridge and tunnel. And Kronos isn't the only titan. One of my hunters spotted a huge man in golden armor mustering an army on the Jersey shore. I'm not sure who he is, but he radiates power like only a titan or god. I remembered the golden titan from records. Great, I said. Any good news? Talia shrugged. We've sealed off the subway tunnels into Manhattan. My best trappers took care of it. Also, it seems like the enemy is waiting for tonight to attack. I think Luke. She caught herself. I mean Kronos needs time to regenerate after each fight. He's still not comfortable with his new form. It's taking a lot of his power to slow time around the city. Grover nodded. Most of his forces are more powerful at night, too. But they'll be back after sundown. I tried to think clearly. Okay, this is getting pathetic. Shino Tsukiyomi. I roared. Shadow clone jutsu. I created several clones each armed with a different weapon. Destroy the bridges. Kill anyone that gets in your way. Hi. They all cried, leaving us. Jake Mason cleared his throat. He'd been standing there so silently I'd almost forgotten he was in the room. Percy. Something else, he said. The way Kronos showed up at the Williamsburg Bridge, like he knew you were going there. And he shifted his forces to our weakest points. As soon as we deployed, he changed tactics. He barely touched the Lincoln Tunnel, where the hunters were strong. He went for our weakest spots, like he knew. Like he had inside information, I said. The spy, I inquired. What spy? Talia demanded. Not to worry, I took care of the traitor. Now rest up while you can. We've got a long night ahead of us, I said, getting tired. After using the Shino Tsukiyomi and several other jutsu had made a clone like me tired. Percy, you too, Talia said. We'll keep an eye on things. Go lie down. We need you in good shape for tonight. Don't tell me what to do, I said. But that would be nice. I found the nearest bedroom and crashed on the canopied bed. The next thing I knew, I heard. Percy, I heard, Talia said. Come on. It's late afternoon. We've got visitors. I sat up, disoriented. The bed was too comfortable, and I hated sleeping in the middle of the day. Visitors, I said. Talia nodded grimly. A titan wants to see you, under a flag of truce. He has a message from Kronos. We could see the white flag from half a mile away. It was as big as a soccer field, carried by a 30-foot-tall giant with bright blue skin and icy gray hair. A Hyperborean, Talia said. The giants of the north. It's a bad sign that they sided with Kronos. They're usually peaceful. You've met them, I said. There's a big colony in Alberta. You do not want to get into a snowball fight with those guys. I rolled my eyes. As the giant got closer, I could see 3 human-size envoys with him. A half-blood in armor, an Empusa demon with a black dress and flaming hair, and a tall man in a tuxedo. The Empusa held the tux dude's arm, so they looked like a couple on their way to a Broadway show or something except for her flaming hair and fangs. The group walked leisurely toward the Heckscher playground. The swings and ball courts were empty. The only sound was the fountain on Umpire Rock. I looked at Grover. The tux dude is the titan. He nodded nervously. He looks like a magician. I hate magicians. They usually have rabbits. I stared at him. You're scared of bunnies. Blah ha ha. They're big bullies. Always stealing celery from defenseless satyrs. Talia coughed. What? Grover demanded. We'll have to work on your bunny phobia later, I said. Here they come. The man in the tux stepped forward. He was taller than an average human, about 7 feet. His black hair was tied in a ponytail. Dark round glasses covered his eyes, but what really caught my attention was the skin on his face. It was covered in scratches, like he'd been attacked by a small animal or really mad hamster, maybe. Percy Jackson, he said in a silky voice. It's a great honor. His lady friend the Empusa hissed at me. My dear, Tux Dude said to her. Why don't you make yourself comfortable over there, eh? She released his arm and drifted over to a park bench. I glanced at the armed demigod behind Tux Dude. I hadn't recognized him in his new helmet, but it was the backstabber Ethan Nakamura. His nose looked like a squashed tomato from our fight on the Williamsburg Bridge. That made me feel better. Hello, Ethan, I said. You're looking good. Ethan glared at me. To business. Tux Dude extended his hand. I am Prometheus. I see. I said. How are your birds if I might ask? Prometheus winced. He touched the scratches on his face. Please, don't mention the vultures. How did you get free? How did I get free? Hercules did that, eons ago. So you see, I have a soft spot for heroes. Some of you can be quite civilized. Unlike the company you keep, I noticed. I was looking at Ethan, but Prometheus apparently thought I meant the Empusa. You have 4 minutes. Oh, demons aren't so bad, he said. You just have to keep them well fed. Now, Percy Jackson, let us parley. He waved me toward a picnic table and we sat down. Nico and Jason stood behind me. The blue giant propped his white flag against a tree and began absently playing on the playground. He stepped on the monkey bars and crushed them, but he didn't seem angry. He just frowned and said, "Uh-oh." Then he stepped in the fountain and broke the concrete bowl in half. Uh-oh. The water froze where his foot touched it. A bunch of stuffed animals hung from his belt, the huge kind you get for grand prizes at an arcade. Prometheus sat forward and laced his fingers. He looked earnest, kindly, and wise. Percy, your position is weak. You know you can't stop another assault. From my point of view, we are more than powerful enough to win this war. Prometheus looked pained, like he really cared what happened to me. Percy, I'm the Titan of Forethought. I know what's going to happen. Also the Titan of Crafty Counsel, Nico put in. Emphasis on crafty. Prometheus shrugged. True enough, spawn of Hades. But I supported the gods in the last war. I told Kronos, you don't have the strength. You'll lose. And I was right. So you see, I know how to pick the winning side. This time, I'm backing Kronos. Because Zeus chained you to a rock, I guessed. Partly, yes, I won't deny I want revenge. But that's not the only reason I'm supporting Kronos. It's the wisest choice. I'm here because I thought you might listen to reason. He drew a map on the table with his finger. Wherever he touched, golden lines appeared, glowing on the concrete. This is Manhattan. We have armies here, 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 and here. We know your numbers. We outnumber you 20 to 1. Really, Shino Tsukiyomi, I said, making little pawns in the map. Because I have several little surprises here, here, and here. I moved a little statue of a slug, a turtle, and an ox to the ocean parts. Plus a few other surprises. I then made a small statue of all the gods and placed them just outside the map. Plus they will be here soon. Prometheus smiled apologetically. Perseus, tonight, Kronos will attack. You will be overwhelmed. You've fought bravely, but there's just no way you can hold all of Manhattan. You'll be forced to retreat to the Empire State Building. There you'll be destroyed. I have seen this. It will happen. I have a tendency to defy fate. I said. Prometheus brushed a speck off his tux lapel. Understand, Percy. You are refighting the Trojan War here. Patterns repeat themselves in history. They reappear just as monsters do. A great siege. 2 armies. The only difference is, this time you are defending. You are Troy. And you know what happened to the Trojans, don't you? So you're going to cram a wooden horse into the elevator at the Empire State Building? I asked. Good luck. Prometheus smiled. Troy was completely destroyed, Percy. You don't want that to happen here. Stand down, and New York will be spared. Your forces will be granted amnesty. I will personally assure your safety. Let Kronos take Olympus. Who cares? Typhon will destroy the gods. My way. Right. Except Typhon is dead. I said, and I'm supposed to believe Kronos would spare the city. Frankly, the way I see it, we are the Spartans and you are the Persians. Quote. Oh, Prometheus asked. Yes. Tell me, do you know of my power? He shook his head. No. My power is that of illusions. But mine are so great that they can become reality. Let me show you. Shino Tsukiyomi. I stood up and created the blade of Olympus. It is by this weapon your brother died. As will every other titan that stands against me. Everyone winced. The blue giant rumbled. Oh. Over at the park bench, the Empusa bared her fangs in a hiss. Percy, the titans and their offspring are not all bad, Prometheus said. You should met Calypso. My face didn't change from a I don't care look. I just stood there holding the blade. That matters not to me. I was raised not to let emotions get in the way. I returned the blade to where it came from. We are not your enemies. Don't let the worst happen, he pleaded. We offer you peace. Understand this. Until Kronos is dead, I will fight, and when this is over all those who stand with him will die. There is no peace as long as the Titan army still stands. I roared. Ethan grabbed the hilt of his sword, but Prometheus stopped him. Now, the Titan said. We're on a diplomatic mission. Prometheus studied me as if trying to understand my anger. Then he nodded like he'd just picked a thought from my brain. Percy, will you be controlled by your fate? Kronos offers you a much better deal. I didn't change face. I'll give you a deal. Tell Kronos to surrender. Then maybe I won't have to destroy him. The Empusa snarled. Her hair erupted in fresh flames, but Prometheus just sighed. If you change your mind, he said, I have a gift for you. A Greek vase appeared on the table. It was about 3 feet high and a foot wide, glazed with black and white geometric designs. The ceramic lid was fastened with a leather harness. Nico gasped. That's not. Yes, Prometheus said. You recognize it. Looking at the jar, I felt a strange sense of fear, but I had no idea why. This belonged to my sister-in-law, Prometheus explained. Pandora. As in Pandora's box. Prometheus shook his head. I don't know how this box business got started. It was never a box. It was a pithos, a storage jar. I suppose Pandora's pithos doesn't have the same ring to it, but never mind that. Yes, she did open this jar, which contained most of the demons that now haunt mankind: fear, death, hunger, sickness. Don't forget me, the Empusa purred. Indeed, Prometheus conceded. The first Empusa was also trapped in this jar, released by Pandora. But what I find curious about the story, Pandora always gets the blame. She is punished for being curious. The gods would have you believe that this is the lesson: mankind should not explore. They should not ask questions. They should do what they are told. In truth, Percy, this jar was a trap designed by Zeus and the other gods. It was revenge on me and my entire family, my poor simple brother Epimetheus and his wife Pandora. The gods knew she would open the jar. They were willing to punish the entire race of humanity along with us. Prometheus tapped the lid of Pandora's jar. Only one spirit remained inside when Pandora opened it. Hope, I said. Prometheus looked pleased. Very good, Percy. Elpis, the spirit of hope, would not abandon humanity. Hope does not leave without being given permission. She can only be released by a child of man. The Titan slid the jar across the table. I give you this as a reminder of what the gods are like, he said. Keep Elpis, if you wish. But if you decide that you have seen enough destruction, enough futile suffering, then open the jar. Let Elpis go. Give up hope, and I will know that you are surrendering. I promise Kronos will be lenient. He will spare the survivors. I stared at the jar. My Sharingan looked it over and I saw something was wrong. I channeled my chakra into my hand and slowly slid the lid. Something black tried to come out and I caught it. It turned solid in my palm and I crushed it. I then slid the rest of the lid of and stuck my hand in. A light blue flame glowed from my hand. Prometheus looked confused and scared. Your time was up long ago, I said as Jason charged with lightning, zoomed by and stabbed the Empusa in the chest, destroying her. Nico shaped his shadow into multiple snakes to attack and bite the giant. Ninja art. Shadow stitching jutsu. Nico changed the shape of his shadows into several sharp needles and controls each separately. They then attacked several spots simultaneously. And that was without Nico even moving. Prometheus looked in horror as my friends killed his most important escorts. We had a truce, he said. I smirked as a pair of large metal gauntlets, each made to resemble a snarling lion's head, that greatly increases the strength of its wielder when worn. I lifted them up and smacked him in the face. I then jumped up and punched him in the face. Left arm returned to normal and shot chakra chains out of my arm, pinning him into place. My other arm was then armed with the blade of Olympus. It as charged as lightning came to the blade, making it glow brighter. You bring the vase of Pandora with a trap in it to my city, you insult my family, you threaten my people with slavery and death. Percy spat. Oh, I chose my words and actions carefully, Titan. You should have done the same. This is blasphemy. This is madness. Madness. This is Olympus, I shouted, thrusting the blade into his body. Oj! Prometheus cried as the blade was forced through his chest. His body fell limp as the blade was removed. The chains retracted into my body and the body laid there dead. I turned to Ethan Nakamura, who gave me a hateful, scared look. "Tell your master what you saw. And tell him this is what awaits him," I said. He ran away as fast as he could and Jason turned to me. "Why kill them?" he asked. I smirked and looked at the dead Titan. "Because it only takes one to deliver a message," I said, walking away. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next part.